Hi guys. Tonight we are going to walk with you out onto a snowy plain where the air bites at your skin and the frost nips at the inside of your nose with every breath. You feel the crunch of frozen ground beneath your moccasins, the silence only broken by the occasional whistle of wind or the distant snap of a branch heavy with ice. It's not just chilly, it's the kind of cold that makes your eyelashes stiffen. The kind of cold where if you forgot your mittens you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it by your clock? Now, dim the lights, let your blankets pull close, and imagine yourself stepping into the world of those who lived without central heating, without fireplaces in every room, and yet somehow managed to stay warm when the nights were harsher than you've ever felt. You stand on a ridge and glance across a frozen valley. Smoke drifts upward from structures that look almost like earth mounds, and you realize that beneath those mounds are families who have solved the riddle of winter long before you ever arrived. Your cheeks burn with cold, and you instinctively press your hands together, feeling how fragile warmth can be. The fact remains people in pre-modern North America didn't just survive the winter. They built entire lives, cultures, and stories around enduring it. The first truth is that native communities lived in diverse climates, from the steaming jungles of the southeast to the tundra of the Arctic. One mainstream fact that anchors us here is that the Plains tribes, like the Mandan, built earth lodges designed to trap warmth through heavy soil walls. Imagine crouching low to crawl inside, and instantly feeling your breath fog against a ceiling lined with poles and clay. These homes were marvels of low-tech insulation. As you pull the fur collar of your coat higher, you picture how quirky solutions emerge too. Did you know that some people carried smoldering embers inside hollow buffalo horns or bark bundles, almost like a primitive pocket heater? Instead of sparking a new flame from scratch each morning, they simply breathed life back into glowing coals. It's the kind of detail that feels both ingenious and slightly comical, you with your to-go ember, hoping it doesn't fizzle out before breakfast. Historians, though, still puzzle over one debate. Did the reliance on such ember carrying mean that fire-starting technologies like the bow drill were less used in daily winter life than we assume? Some argue yes, that the bow drill was more ceremonial or for backup, while others say ember carrying was only one of many strategies. The truth may be tucked away in oral histories that shift with each retelling. As you stand here, the stars press close in the brittle air. The Milky Way arcs like a frozen river above you, and every gust seems to whisper how fragile your body is in this vast cold. You rub your hands, imagining how much easier it would be if you had the thick buffalo robes layered over your shoulders. The scent of hide and smoke would cling to you, pungent but comforting. And as you remember, warmth is not just a matter of temperature, it's security, it's belonging. It's the difference between being an outsider on the frozen ridge and being curled inside the glowing, ember-lit lodge. You tilt your head to hear faint singing in the distance, voices carried through the cold. It strikes you how warmth isn't only physical, it's communal. The chants and laughter that filter out of the lodges form a blanket of their own. The wind is cruel, the stars are pitiless, but human invention and human company together manage to soften the night. And so, as you linger on this ridge, your journey into their strategies begins with a single breath fogging in the dark, a reminder that to stay alive here, you must learn from every detail around you. You pull the thought of buffalo closer to you now, not the beast charging across the plains, but the thick hide left behind after the hunt. Imagine sinking your hands into that dense fur, the kind that still smells of wild grass and smoke. The Great Plains tribes knew that this hide was more than just material. It was a fortress against cold. You wrap it around yourself, and suddenly the wind doesn't sting quite so sharply. You feel heavy, cocooned, almost like a giant child tucked into a natural sleeping bag. One solid historical point is that buffalo hides were used not just as clothing but as full-body coverings, layered on top of each other to create sleeping robes that rivaled the insulation of any modern sleeping bag. These robes, often lined with softer fur on the inside, were wide enough to cover several people at once. You picture a family huddled together, fur over fur, while outside the snow keeps falling and coyotes cry in the distance. A peculiar detail that might make you smile is how some hunters preferred hides taken in the deep winter because the animal's coat was thicker, fluffier, and therefore warmer. That meant a robe made from a January buffalo could feel different, almost luxurious, compared to one made from a summer kill. It's like having your winter and summer wardrobes only based on when the prey happened to be taken. You probably wouldn't have thought of fashion shows in the snow, but out here, the difference could mean an easier night's sleep. Yet researchers still discuss how far-reaching this hide usage was. Some say the hides were universal, every family wrapping themselves like burritos of fur, while others argue that only the wealthiest or most successful hunters could afford the thickest, best-preserved robes. Did everyone share equally, or did the cold stratify warmth as much as it stratified resources? The records leave us guessing. Your body heat under a buffalo hide would slowly build until you almost sweat, despite the blizzard outside. You could shift, stretch, and hear the creak of the frozen leather as it flexed. Picture the weight pressing you gently into the earth, like a grounding hand. The smell of hide, smoke, and faint blood clings, but you barely care, because you're warm. Now imagine how these hides extended beyond robes. Strips of buffalo fur lined the insides of moccasins, wrapping toes in a cozy cradle. The long hairs might poke out like untrimmed fringe, creating a shaggy slipper that laughed at frostbite. When the winds picked up, hides were draped across entrances of tepees, creating door flaps that shivered but held. These small details stitched together a life where warmth was never guaranteed but carefully crafted. You listen as laughter filters out from a group gathered inside a tepee, their buffalo robes thrown over their shoulders like cloaks of nobility. Children roll into piles of fur, giggling despite the cold seeping through the cracks. The fire crackles faintly, but the real barrier against the cold is the layered mass of hide surrounding them. You realize then that warmth is not just physical comfort but also a psychological balm wrapped in buffalo. You believe you can outlast any storm. You shift the robe in your mind, pulling it tighter, and let the fur scratch lightly at your cheeks. It is heavy, yes, but the kind of heavy that reassures you, like the weight of a blanket today that makes your eyelids heavier and your body slower. For a moment, the blizzard fades into background noise, and you find yourself safe in the cocoon that generations before you trusted with their very lives. You step off the snowy ridge and shuffle toward one of those rounded mounds you spotted earlier, curious about what lies inside. The outside looks almost like a hill with a wooden skeleton, layered over with sod and dirt until it blends into the earth. At first glance, you might mistake it for a natural rise in the landscape, but then you notice the narrow tunnel leading into the side, low enough that you must crawl. Cold air bites your knees as you stoop forward, but a dim glow beckons from within. One mainstream fact here: the Mandan, Hidatsa, and other tribes of the plains built earth lodges that could house large extended families, often 40 feet across and supported by massive central beams. Imagine the labor whole communities cutting logs, layering brush, then sealing it all with soil until the walls were several feet thick. The result was insulation that rivaled modern concrete. Step inside, and the outside world falls silent, the wind muffled as if you've entered another planet. A quirky tidbit adds charm. Some of these lodges had a symbolic orientation, with the entrance facing east to greet the rising Sunday. It wasn't just about warmth, but about aligning with cosmic rhythms. You crawl in, nose brushing the frozen earth, and suddenly you realize you're entering both a shelter and a world view. The light flickers from a central hearth, glowing against smoke-darkened beams above. Scholars, however, keep debating how much heat truly lingered once the fire died down. Some argue that the packed earth acted like a giant thermal battery, storing warmth through the day and releasing it at night. Others suggest the lodge still grew bitterly cold without constant tending. Was the comfort legendary? Or was it relative only when compared to the icy plains outside? The truth, as always, probably lies in between. You sit cross-legged inside now, listening to the crackle of fire. The smell of smoke clings thickly, but it's the smell of survival. Around you, families stretch out on bedding woven from reeds, their buffalo robes pulled close. Children nestle against grandparents, breathing soft, steady breaths that fog faintly in the firelight. You glance upward at the smoke hole cut in the roof, a perfect engineering compromise large enough to let out smoke, small enough to trap most of the heat. Snowflakes drift lazily through, sizzling when they touch the flames. The air feels heavy but comforting. Your back presses against an earthen wall that holds in the day's faint warmth. Outside, the wind shrieks. Inside, the sound is dulled to a whisper. You run your hand along the wall and feel a faint vibration, as if the earth itself is lending you its patience. These lodges were not just structures, they were permanent symbols of community, grounding people in a climate that would have otherwise scattered them. Someone nearby stirs a pot suspended over the fire, steam rising in a fragrant spiral. The warmth of food becomes another layer of insulation, heating not just your belly but the entire atmosphere of the lodge. You realize now that the design of these homes was as much about psychology as physics. The illusion of comfort mattered as much as actual temperature. And when everyone breathed together, sang together, and pressed their bodies into one shared space, the warmth multiplied in ways a thermometer could never measure. You close your eyes, letting the murmur of voices become a soft hum. The earth presses in from all sides, not crushing but embracing, like a parent's hand around a child's. The lodge is dark, smoky, and simple, yet inside it you feel something powerful, an assurance that the cold outside can rage as fiercely as it wants, and you will still endure. You leave the smoky earth lodge behind and step toward another kind of shelter, smaller, lighter, and built not from soil but from flexible saplings bent into graceful curves. Before you even reach the doorway, the smell of bark and reeds meets your nose. You press your palm against the frame, feeling how it flexes but doesn't break, a living ribcage of the forest. This is the Wigwam, the domed home of many Algonquian-speaking peoples in the woodlands of the northeast, and it becomes your next lesson in how to tame the winter cold without brick or steel. It's firmly established that wigwams were covered in overlapping sheets of birch bark or woven mats, sometimes layered with animal hides, to create walls thick enough to block out wind and snow. Step inside, and you sense how those layers trap warmth. Each one forms a barrier, the same way we today put on sweaters, coats, and scarves in sequence. You crouch low, the entrance sealed with a flap, and realize the temperature inside rises simply from human presence. The fire in the center is modest, a faint glow licking upward toward a smoke hole, but the walls magnify its effect until the air feels breathable and safe. What might amuse you, though, is the practical creativity that surrounded wigwam insulation. Families often tucked tufts of moss or grass between bark sheets, almost like primitive caulking. Imagine crouching by the wall and stuffing handfuls of green into the cracks, humming to yourself, knowing that each pinch of moss might mean the difference between shivering through the night and waking up refreshed. It's the kind of chore children might have done, turning survival into a game, who can plug the gap the fastest, while snowflakes drifted outside. Researchers remain divided on how effective these smaller shelters were against deep northern winters. Some claim the design worked brilliantly because the compact space trapped body heat quickly, especially when families clustered close together. Others suggest wigwams could still be uncomfortably drafty, especially if bark peeled or mats wore thin after long use. Did people spend winters in them comfortably, or were they always seen as temporary, stopgap shelters until spring returned? Archaeologists and ethnographers still don't fully agree. You kneel down on the rush mats lining the floor. Beneath them lies packed earth, cool and solid, yet softened by the weave of reeds. Your fingertips brush the pattern, rough and fibrous, but warmer than bare soil. Someone has hung fur robes along the walls, and the thick pelts double as both storage and insulation. The sound of wind outside is muffled, not erased, like listening to the world through heavy curtains. Inside, the crackle of a tiny fire sounds louder than it should, its warmth magnified by the closeness of the walls. A family sits with you, sharing roasted nuts pulled from a clay pot. The smell of pine needles wafts from another bowl, steeped in hot water as a kind of tea. You realize the wigwam is not a grand palace, but it doesn't need to be. The real magic is scale small enough to heat quickly, big enough to hold those who matter. The curved roof channels smoke upward in lazy spirals. You watch a child poke the coals with a stick, her giggles rising like sparks. The design of wigwams was also flexible literally. In warmer months, mats could be rolled up, bark peeled back, letting breezes drift through. In winter, every layer returned, stitched tight and weighed down with stones. It was a home that breathed with the seasons. Today, when you zip up a tent on a camping trip, you're echoing a principle that wigwams perfected: light framework, adaptable walls, one glowing fire at the center of it all. Curiously, some accounts tell us that the word wigwam itself wasn't limited to one type of structure, but described various domed or conical dwellings, depending on region. That linguistic slipperiness might explain why outsiders often misunderstood them, thinking they were fragile huts when in reality they could withstand months of winter if maintained. You can almost smile at the thought of early colonists underestimating these homes, only to discover how warm they stayed while European cabins still let in drafts. The debate continues over whether wigwams were primarily the work of women or if men played a larger role in construction. Some ethnographers insist women oversaw the assembly of mats and the organization of interiors, while men handled the heavy framework. Others argue these roles overlapped, more than rigid categories allow. The lack of consensus reminds you that even in something as physical as building a home, cultural memory weaves a complex story. Now lean back against the bark wall, your breath fogging faintly in the dim space. The air feels close, filled with the scents of wood smoke, pine, and animal hide. The steady sound of wind outside has become background music, almost soothing, as if the wigwam itself is humming a lullaby. You realize how much survival here depended not on brute force, but on careful layering of materials, of roles, of families huddled together. You glance up at the ribs of saplings arching above you. Each one bends toward the smoke hole, forming a dome like the shell of a turtle. And maybe that image sticks, because for some communities the turtle was a symbol of the earth itself, protective and enduring. In that sense, lying inside the wigwam feels like nestling into the body of a giant guardian. The cold outside is real, yes, but in here, warmth has become a shared promise, renewed each night when families tuck moss into the gaps and let the fire glow. The wigwam doesn't pretend to erase the winter. Instead, it teaches you that warmth is built from cooperation. One person weaving mats, another tending coals, a child laughing as she seals a crack with moss. Together, these small acts form a shield stronger than stone. And as you stretch out on the reed mat, letting your eyes close, you understand that what matters most in the end isn't how perfect the shelter is, but how much heart is stitched into its frame. You wake with the faint smell of smoke in your hair and step back into the chill air, brushing frost from your eyelashes. The dawn has turned the snow a pale lavender, and you follow the path of footprints to another familiar sight of the plains, the towering cone of a tepee. You've seen drawings in history books, perhaps even replicas at festivals, but standing before one in this frozen morning is something else entirely. The structure is both elegant and practical, a geometry of survival. It's widely recognized that tepees were designed with both portability and insulation in mind. Long poles lean together to form a conical frame, wrapped in hides stitched carefully so the seams overlapped against the wind. The pointed top wasn't decorative, it housed the smoke hole, a clever feature that allowed fire to burn inside without filling the interior with choking clouds. You stoop to enter, and the world outside vanishes in an instant. An offbeat detail makes you grin. Some accounts describe people adjusting the flaps at the smoke hole almost like weather vanes, turning them with poles from the ground to match the shifting winds. You can picture someone in the middle of the night, half asleep, poking a long stick upward to flip the flap into position, grumbling as sparks float past. It's part engineering, part midnight comedy routine, and it meant that families could rest easier without waking to smoke-stung eyes. There's still no consensus about how much heat these structures truly retained. Some researchers emphasize that the sloping walls reflected warmth inward, creating a snug environment even in sub-zero conditions. Others insist that tepees were more drafty than romanticized, especially when hides aged or stitching loosened. Was the comfort legendary or only relative compared to sleeping outside under the stars? The answer drifts between oral histories and archaeological traces, refusing to settle. You crouch by the central fire. The embers glow orange, a circle of light licking the darkness, and your skin prickles as heat brushes against your face. Above, the smoke hole lets thin grey streams escape, curling like ghostly ribbons into the sky. The scent of wood smoke mingles with the musky tang of hides. You press your palm against the floor covering buffalo robes laid over willow branches and feel a subtle warmth radiating upward, as if the earth itself is cooperating. Children shuffle closer to the fire, still half dreaming, their hair smelling of char and fur. A woman adjusts a flap with a practiced hand, letting in just enough air to keep the fire healthy. You notice how much of the design rests not on walls or roofs, but on constant care venting, patching, adjusting, tending. The tepee is not static architecture. It's a living arrangement that demands attention, like a pet that sulks if neglected. Another curious touch: tepees could be disassembled in a matter of hours. Hides rolled, poles bundled, and everything lashed to a travois, dragged by horses or dogs. Portability was survival, especially for plains tribes who followed bison herds. You imagine the scene: morning sun glinting off frost as entire families dismantle their homes, piling belongings onto sled-like frames. By noon, the settlement is a bare field of footprints, the warmth carried away to the next camp. But for now, you're inside one that stands tall, the fire crackling steadily. You stretch out on a robe, the smoke hole glowing faintly with morning light. The wind outside moans, but here it becomes only a whisper. Your nose tingles from the mingled heat and smoke, but your toes warm against the hides. You realize the tepee doesn't shut the winter out entirely. Instead, it teaches you to live with the balance of elements: warmth tempered by smoke, shelter tempered by draft, movement tempered by weight. Researchers also suggest that tepees had symbolic meanings layered onto their practicality. Some anthropologists point to the conical shape as a reflection of the sacred mountain, a miniature cosmos where earth met sky. Others argue the symbolism is overstated, a later interpretation imposed by outsiders romanticizing a functional home. The disagreement lingers: like smoke, some see sacred geometry, others see pure pragmatism. Perhaps both are true. As you lie back, the interior walls glow faintly with firelight, their surfaces uneven, stitched with sinew. Each seam tells of hands that sewed by firelight, each hide once the back of an animal that roamed the plains. The tepee is more than shelter, it's a woven record of hunts, labors, and nights spent stitching in the cold. You can feel that history pressing around you like a second skin. You listen to the small noises inside: the crackle of wood, the shuffle of feet, the gentle sigh of someone adjusting their robe in sleep. These are the sounds of survival, quiet but steady. They remind you that warmth was never only about temperature. It was about rhythm, routine, and persistence. The tepee embodies that. Never perfect, always demanding care, but always sufficient. Now imagine stepping outside again. The cone looms behind you, its smoke flaps fluttering in the wind. From a distance, tepees in a circle form a village that looks almost ceremonial, each one sending up its own spiral of smoke. The air smells of hundreds of fires blending into one cloud. To live here was to live in cooperation, your shelter part of a larger ring, each home's warmth contributing to the whole. As the wind cuts across your face again, you glance back and understand why the tepee endures in cultural memory. It is both humble and striking, fragile and strong, impermanent and enduring. And you know that without such structures, without the people who built and cared for them, the winters of the plains would have swallowed entire generations long before you ever came to imagine them. You leave the tepee behind with smoke still lingering in your hair, stepping into the sharp bite of night air. The wind hisses across the plain, and every part of you begs for another layer of protection. Ahead, a group bends over a fire, not to cook food, but to heat stones. At first, you think it's a simple ritual, rocks glowing faintly, red veins of fire seeping into their cores. Then you realize this is more than firewood management. It's thermal storage, one of the oldest and cleverest tricks to outlast the cold. Archaeological evidence confirms that across North America, people heated rocks in open flames and then carried them carefully, sometimes with sticks, sometimes wrapped in bark to bury in pits under sleeping areas. Those stones radiated warmth for hours, like primitive space heaters hidden in the ground. Picture yourself crawling into a shelter, the earth beneath you faintly warm, heat seeping upward into your bones long after the flames outside died down. The idea feels strangely modern, like geothermal heating, yet it was born of necessity centuries before engineers put it on blueprints. A surprising quirk to this practice is that people sometimes tucked warmed stones directly into hides or blankets, creating what you might call the original hot water bottle. Imagine lying down and feeling a solid lump against your ribs, its heat pulsing slowly through layers of fur. You'd shift a little to avoid the burn, then sigh as the warmth spread out. The thought might make you chuckle. It's both cozy and slightly uncomfortable, like a pet rock that insists on being useful. Debate continues over just how widespread this method was. Some anthropologists argue it was common across many regions, from the plains to the northwest coast, wherever stones were abundant. Others suggest it was more situational, used only in deep winter or during ceremonial practices when fires couldn't be left burning overnight. Was stone heating a daily bedtime routine or a specialized survival trick? The evidence remains uneven, like ashes blown thin across time. You crouch beside the fire now, listening to the hiss and pop as moisture inside the rocks steams away. Sparks leap into the night. The heat is almost unbearable at arm's length, yet you know within minutes these same stones will be tucked beneath earth and fur to cradle sleepers against the cold. Someone lifts a glowing rock with a forked branch, drops it into a bark sling, and carries it with care, like moving a fragile infant. The ritual has a rhythm: heat, carry, bury, repeat. Inside the shelter, you see the effect. A shallow pit lined with stones glows faintly before it's covered with soil. Above, people spread mats and robes, settling down as if lying atop a hidden hearth. The ground radiates warmth upward, softening muscles and easing the sting of frost. You stretch out on one of the mats, surprised at how comforting the heat feels compared to the biting wind outside. Your eyelids grow heavy almost instantly, lulled by the steady exhale of warmth from beneath. It wasn't only for sleeping. Warm rocks also served in cooking pits, heating food underground, but the heat left over after meals doubled as insulation for bodies. You imagine a snowy night where supper and slumber became part of the same cycle. Rocks roasted food, then roasted cold itself, leaving families drowsy and satisfied. The practicality is almost poetic. Curiously, some traditions wove stories around stones, treating them as living entities that carried the fire's spirit. To place them under the bed was not just practical but protective, as if fire itself had stretched into the earth to watch over sleepers. You can almost hear an elder telling a child, "The stones will keep you safe tonight." the words serving both as science and lullaby. As you settle deeper into this thought, the smell of smoke still clings to your clothes. The muted warmth of the ground seeps through your back. Outside, the wind roars, but here you feel a secret ally beneath you, humming with stolen heat. The fire has become silent, hidden underground, yet it works just as faithfully as any hearth. Modern readers might wonder how effective such methods truly were, but your body tells you, effective enough. The warmth may not be blazing, but it's steady, reliable, and paired with furs it creates a cocoon that lasts until dawn. And it's portable too, unlike a fireplace fixed in stone. These hot rocks could be prepared anywhere, from forest clearings to icy plains. Flexibility was its own kind of comfort. You watch the last sparks die as families curl up above their buried heaters. Their breathing deepens, and the shelter fills with quiet. Somewhere outside, a coyote yips, the sound thin and lonely. Yet inside, you feel the opposite of lonely, bound together by an invisible grid of heat, by the shared trust in glowing rocks and careful hands. The debate over whether this practice was ordinary or exceptional might never resolve, but lying here, you realize the argument hardly matters. Warmth is warmth, no matter how it's made, and the ingenuity of using stone to hold the fire through the night remains one of those small marvels of human persistence. You close your eyes, the ground humming faintly beneath you, and understand why this method endured. It turns something as inert as a rock into a guardian, a partner, a vessel of life. And you drift into half-dreams, knowing that even when the flames die, the earth itself continues to glow in secret. The night presses in, heavy and endless, and even the warmth of the stones buried beneath your mat fades with time. You shift in your sleep, draw your robe tighter, and suddenly realize something else is happening here, something far simpler than fire or stone. You're not alone. A shoulder brushes yours, a knee nudges your side, and slowly you piece together the oldest heating system of all, body against body. It's firmly noted in early ethnographic accounts that many native families slept communally, children tucked between parents, grandparents bundled in the same robe, cousins sharing mats without hesitation. A single buffalo hide large enough to cover 3 or 4 people became more efficient than splitting into smaller beds. The mathematics of survival were clear. More bodies meant more warmth. You turn onto your side and feel the steady rhythm of breath against your neck, the warmth of another chest radiating outward like a small furnace. One detail that borders on comical is how some travelers described the morning routine families disentangling themselves like knots of fur and limbs, groaning at the cold air that rushed in as soon as the robes were pulled back. Picture yourself half asleep, clinging desperately to the last bit of warmth, only to be yanked from your cocoon when someone stirs. It's messy, awkward, and utterly human. Scholars disagree on how much of this arrangement was necessity and how much was cultural choice. Some argue that shared sleeping quarters reinforced bonds, keeping families close in both body and spirit. Others point out that space was often limited in lodges and wigwams. There simply wasn't room for privacy, so huddling became inevitable. Was warmth the main goal, or was it simply the byproduct of living shoulder to shoulder? The answer probably shifts depending on who tells the story. You breathe in the mingled scents of smoke, fur, and human presence. The air feels heavy, not entirely pleasant, too many bodies in too little space, but you can't deny the effectiveness. The cold wind outside may bite at the walls, but inside this knot of warmth, your skin feels flushed. A child curls closer, her small hand resting lightly on your arm, and you think of how survival has always leaned on togetherness. It isn't just family who share the warmth. In some communities, dogs, sled animals, hunters' companions, guardians curled alongside people at night, their fur and steady breathing adding another layer of insulation. You might at first resist the idea, but lying here in the cold, you'd welcome the nudge of a muzzle against your shoulder if it meant one more degree of warmth. The bond between human and animal is as practical as it is emotional. Curiously, there are accounts from explorers who were startled at how tightly people huddled, seeing it as a lack of propriety. Yet for the families themselves, it was simply common sense. Survival cares little for etiquette. You imagine one of those outsiders trying to sleep separately, shivering all night while nearby children giggled in their warm heap. Sometimes adaptation means ignoring what looks odd to someone else. The debate also lingers about whether communal sleeping encouraged deeper cultural practices of storytelling and dream sharing. Some researchers suggest that lying so close together made whispered tales before sleep more natural, binding not only warmth but memory. Others dismiss that as speculation, insisting warmth alone dictated the custom. But as you close your eyes and hear the low murmur of a voice spinning a tale just inches away, it's hard not to believe that comfort and story walked hand in hand. You shift slightly, your arm brushing another's, and realize the warmth is not just heat, it's trust. To let someone sleep pressed against you means accepting vulnerability, letting them hear your breath, feel your heartbeat, share your body's secrets. Out here, where frostbite can steal fingers and toes, such intimacy is not optional but required. And maybe that's why bonds in these communities ran so deep. The warmth of winter nights carried into daylight kinship. The shelter itself seems to respond to this closeness. The smoke hole overhead breathes gently, letting out the faintest trail. The walls quiver under the wind, but the bodies inside remain still, pressed together into one giant organism. You can almost imagine the lodge itself sighing, exhaling with each synchronized breath. In the dim glow of the fire, you study the layers of robes thrown over the group, fur on fur, hide on hide, until the mass becomes indistinguishable, a single mound of survival. Somewhere beneath, a child coughs softly, then drifts back into silence. You feel the vibration through the shared bedding and recognize how collective living turns individuals into a single pulse. At dawn, when the first light seeps through the smoke hole, the spell breaks. One person stirs, then another. Robes are pulled back, and the rush of cold air stings your face like icy needles. For a moment you shiver violently, wishing the night could last forever. But then the fire crackles again, and warmth slowly returns. You watch the group stretch, laugh, and stumble into the day, their closeness already taken for granted. It's easy to romanticize the idea of communal sleeping, to see it as quaint or even idyllic. But the reality is more complicated. Occasional discomfort, cramped quarters, and the occasional elbow in the ribs. Yet you realize that in the long history of winter, this messy intimacy was one of the most reliable defenses. The warmth of many bodies was more enduring than any single fire, more resilient than any pile of stones. As you step outside into the frost, you feel the echo of the night's warmth still clinging to your skin. The cold slaps you awake, but deep inside, your core holds steady. You realize that sometimes survival is not about tools or shelters at all, it's about the courage to draw closer, to share breath and space, to let trust itself become the hearth. And so you walk on, warmed by the memory of bodies pressed close, carrying their heat with you into the next trial. The morning has barely shaken off its frost, yet already you feel the bite in your toes, a reminder that even the warmest heap of bodies cannot fully shield you from the elements. You glance down at your feet, wriggling them inside their coverings, and wonder how anyone in these lands kept their extremities safe without wool socks, electric heaters, or double-pane windows. The answer is simple but brilliant. Clothing layered like armor, each piece crafted from fur and hide, designed not by fashion but by survival. It's well recorded that native peoples across the continent developed cold-weather outfits tailored to their environments, from fur-lined moccasins in the woodlands to the heavy parkas of the Arctic. You slide your feet into a pair of those moccasins in your mind, the inner layer padded with rabbit fur, the outer hide stitched tightly with sinew to keep out snow. The fit is snug, almost glove-like, and as you stamp down into the snow, you notice the difference immediately. The icy ground no longer gnaws at your bones. Instead, each step is cushioned by a soft, warm barrier. An unexpected little detail is that some communities stuffed their footwear with dried grass or moss, changed daily, to act like natural socks. It sounds almost comical, you imagine, emptying your shoes each morning, shaking out tufts of straw like a farmer with hay in his boots, but it worked remarkably well. The fibers wicked away, sweat provided insulation, and could be replaced as easily as plucking a handful from the nearest meadow. Researchers still wrestle with the origins of certain designs. Did the caribou fur parka of the Inuit emerge independently, or was it refined through centuries of experimentation across related Arctic groups? Some say the layering of skins with fur turned inward was an invention too precise to be accidental, while others insist trial and error would have eventually led anyone in such climates to the same solution. The arguments drift like snowflakes, different paths, same conclusion. Survival demanded genius. You pull an imaginary hood over your head now, fur brushing against your cheeks, and immediately the wind softens. Parkas lined with caribou or sealskin were so effective that modern scientists have marveled at their thermal properties, noting they outperformed many industrial materials. Your breath fogs inside the hood, warming your nose before it can freeze. Even your eyelashes feel safer beneath the curtain of fur. The layering didn't stop at coats and shoes. Leggings stitched from hide wrapped your thighs, often double-layered, tied at the waist with belts of woven fiber. Mittens hung from cords around the neck, their insides thick with fur, their outsides sometimes waterproofed with animal fat. You slide your hands inside a pair and feel the immediate difference. Your fingers no longer ache but relax, flexing gently in their warm cave. The sensation is almost luxurious, as if your body has been given permission to breathe again. What may surprise you further is the ingenuity of sewing itself. Without metal needles, people used bone or antler, whittled to fine points. Thread came from sinew, the fibrous tissue from animal muscles, strong yet pliable. You imagine crouching by firelight, drawing a bone needle through hide, sinew pulling taut, stitch after stitch. Each piece of clothing wasn't just an item, it was hours of labor, a testament to patience and necessity. The debate lingers over how much individuality entered these garments. Were they purely functional, or did artistry matter even in the harshest climates? Some argue decoration, beadwork, dyes, fringe was reserved for special occasions, while others find evidence of elaborate designs even in everyday wear. Perhaps warmth and beauty walk together more often than we assume, proving that survival needn't be dull. Now picture yourself trudging through waist-deep snow, wrapped in layers of hide and fur. Each breath is visible, puffing out like smoke, but your core stays steady, your toes still nimble in their grass-stuffed moccasins. The crunch of snow beneath you feels less threatening. The clothing has become its own kind of shelter, a portable wigwam wrapped around your body. You are no longer a fragile creature exposed to the cold, you are armored, insulated, transformed. You kneel to tie the leggings tighter and notice how the knot sits snug, preventing drafts from creeping in. A child next to you pulls her hood lower, the fur brushing her face like a curtain. She laughs, her cheeks red but not from frostbite. Instead, they glow with health. Her mittens dangle from a cord, and she tugs them back on as casually as you might adjust a scarf today. Curiously, some clothing wasn't just for warmth but for signaling. Brightly dyed patterns or beadwork could announce clan identity, marital status, or simple pride in craftsmanship. Imagine the splash of red ochre against white snow, a hint of individuality in a sea of fur. To be warm and expressive at once, that was another form of resilience. As the wind whips harder, you pull your hood tight and realize how silence falls inside it. The world muffles, the blizzard reduced to a hush. Warmth isn't only physical here, it's psychological. The cocoon of fur tells your body you are safe, and in that reassurance, you can rest. You walk onward, layers rustling softly, each seam a reminder of ingenuity. The cold presses hard, but you no longer dread it. Every stitch of sinew, every tuft of grass, Every patch of fur has been marshaled to keep you alive. And as you move, you understand the genius wasn't in inventing a single perfect garment, but in layering them all together, creating a portable shelter against the endless white. You leave the woodland shelters behind and trek northward in your imagination, where the horizon stretches white and endless, a flat sea of snow under a pale sky. The air is so sharp it feels like glass inside your lungs, and every breath threatens to freeze your eyelashes together. Here, in the Arctic, there are no trees for bark, no buffalo for hides, no soil for lodges, yet somehow, families endured. The answer rises before you in clean blocks stacked in a graceful spiral. The snow house, better known as the igloo. Archaeological evidence shows that Inuit and other Arctic peoples built igloos as temporary shelters during hunting trips, often completing one in just a few hours. The blocks weren't just random piles of snow. They were cut carefully with knives of bone or later metal, carved from wind-packed drifts whose density made them sturdy. You step closer and touch a wall. It feels cold to your skin, of course, but your fingers tell you something else too. The blocks interlock like puzzle pieces, holding firm against the gales. A detail that might make you smile is the entrance design. Igloos often had a tunnel that dipped down and then rose slightly before opening into the main chamber. That downward bend trapped the coldest air, forcing it to sink and stay near the tunnel floor, while warmer air from the fire and human bodies remained inside the dome. Imagine crawling through that tunnel, snow brushing your shoulders, and suddenly emerging into a chamber where the temperature feels shockingly mild, still cold by modern standards, but survivable, even comfortable. Researchers are divided over how warm these snow houses truly became. Some experiments suggest the inside could rise above freezing, even reaching into the 40s Fahrenheit, thanks to body heat and tiny lamps. Others argue those numbers exaggerate, pointing out that drafts and melting weakened the structure over time. Was the igloo a snug refuge or a barely tolerable stopgap? The truth may lie in the middle, shaped by conditions and maintenance. You crawl into one now, knees scraping along the icy tunnel. At first, the chamber seems stark, white walls curving above, light filtering through the snow itself so that everything glows a faint blue. You settle on a platform carved from packed snow, covered in furs to keep bodies off the ice. The fire pit or lamp sits in the center, its flame steady but small, casting shadows that dance across crystalline walls. The silence is uncanny outside, the wind shrieks, but in here it's muffled to a whisper, as if you've stepped underwater. Your breath fogs and hangs in the air, adding to the moisture that slowly forms a glaze on the inside walls. Strangely, that glaze helps. The thin sheet of ice seals cracks, making the igloo stronger and more insulated. You realize that even your exhalations, tiny puffs of water vapor, contribute to survival. Nothing is wasted. A curious note appears in some oral traditions. Certain igloos were large enough to host feasts or dances, built as temporary community centers on the ice. The idea seems almost absurd, laughter and song echoing inside a dome of snow, warmth shared not just through fire but through joy. Yet it paints a vivid picture of resilience, where even ice itself became a stage for human connection. You glance upward and notice how the blocks spiral inward, each one leaning slightly until they converge at the top. It's an engineer's dream, no mortar, no beams, just geometry holding everything together. The dome presses down equally in all directions, so the structure grows stronger under weight rather than weaker. Snow, the very substance that chills you to the bone, here becomes ally and architecture. The debate continues about whether igloos were used only for short-term hunts or if some families occupied them for extended stretches of winter. Some anthropologists insist they were strictly temporary, a few nights at most. Others point to accounts of seasonal villages dotted with snow houses, suggesting people could remain in them for weeks. The uncertainty lingers, but lying here now, you can believe both. Built quickly, abandoned easily, but perfectly capable of holding life long enough to matter. As you sit on the fur-covered platform, You notice how sound behaves differently inside. Every small motion echoes slightly, softened by the snow, but magnified by the dome. A whisper travels farther than you'd expect, curling around the chamber like smoke. Imagine a child giggling, and the sound carrying to every ear in the room. Warmth here is not only thermal, it's acoustic, a cocoon of voices against the silence of the tundra. Your nose tingles from the cool air, but you pull your parka tighter and let the small lamp flicker. Its flame smells faintly of oil and soot, its light casting a golden hue against the bluish walls. The contrast feels almost magical, blue and gold woven together, a palette born of survival. You press your palm to the wall and feel its firmness, a reminder that what seems fragile can in fact be enduring. Crawling back out into the tunnel, you glance once more at the dome rising from the snowfield. From outside it looks like a simple mound, easily overlooked by anyone not searching. Yet inside it holds laughter, stories, dreams, and heat. The paradox clings to you. The coldest substance on earth, when shaped by human hands, becomes a vessel of warmth. You walk away across the white expanse, cheeks stinging but a little less afraid. The igloo stands behind you like a quiet guardian, proof that even in the harshest desert of ice, people found ways not only to endure, but to live, to celebrate, to carve comfort from snow itself. And that knowledge, you realize, is as warming as any fire. The snow house fades behind you, a glowing dome on the horizon, and you step further into the Arctic night. The cold here is not just a sensation, it's a force, a constant reminder that survival requires more than blankets of fur or domes of snow. Ahead, a faint glow beckons, a flame not fed by logs or branches, for none exist here, but by something far stranger to you. The air smells faintly oily, a tang that lingers on your lips before you even reach the light. You realize you've found the heart of Arctic ingenuity, the grease lamp. Well-documented accounts tell us that Inuit and related peoples relied on stone lamps called quillik, shallow bowls carved from soapstone, filled with seal or whale oil. A wick made of moss or dried cotton grass lined the rim, slowly drawing the fuel into flame. You kneel close, and the fire flickers with a steady patience, softer than a bonfire but more enduring. This one small glow served as stove, heater, and light source all at once. Without it, the igloo or skin tent would be nothing more than a freezer. What might amuse you, though, is how carefully these lamps had to be tended. The wick required constant trimming with a carved bone tool, lest the flames sputter or smoke. Imagine a family sitting around, one person always poking at the wick like a sleepy night watchman, adjusting and nudging, keeping the balance just right. It feels almost like babysitting fire itself, nurturing a living creature that sulks if ignored. Debate lingers over whether the lamps could truly heat a space enough for comfort. Some experiments suggest they raised igloo interiors to tolerable levels, preventing frostbite and keeping food thawed. Others argue they provided more psychological than physical warmth, a small flame that reassured even if it didn't truly transform the cold. Was the lamp a dependable heater or a fragile illusion of safety? Scholars remain divided. You sit near the quillik now, and the smell of seal oil curls into your nostrils, thick and pungent. It's not the fragrance of pine logs or cedar chips. It's harsher, more animal, but no less sacred. The flame dances quietly, throwing gold onto blue walls, and you lean closer until your cheeks glow. Around you, families press in, their faces reflecting the same light. For a moment you realize the lamp isn't just heat, it's companionship, a circle of life clustered around a fragile glow in the ice. The wick hisses faintly as it consumes fuel, drops of oil glisten at the stone edge, and a woman leans forward with a tool to trim the moss, steadying the flame. Her hands move automatically, practiced from years of tending. You watch the precision, too much oil, and the lamp smokes, too little, and it dies. Balance is everything. The same way survival here is always balanced between scarcity and need. Curiously, the quillik was more than utility. In many traditions it held spiritual weight, symbolizing the sun itself during the long winter night. Some stories say the flame represented the warmth of family, or even the goddess who watched over hearth and home. You imagine whispering a prayer as the lamp is lit, trusting that its flame not only banishes cold but invites protection. In that sense, each wick trim is not just maintenance but ritual, every flicker a reminder of life's stubborn persistence. The lamp also cooked food, its low-flame heating pots of seal broth or drying clothing hung above. You lift a fur mitten and feel it stiff with frost, then drape it near the flame. Slowly the fibers soften, the ice melting into droplets that hiss as they hit the stone. The mitten warms, pliable again, ready for another day outside. Something so small as a flame makes the difference between frostbitten fingers and useful hands. Still, you can't help smiling at the thought of the smell. The pungent oil clings to everything: robes, hair, bedding. Outsiders often complained, wrinkling noses, but for those who lived here, that odor meant safety. Better the tang of seal fat than the silence of frozen darkness. Smell, after all, is just another kind of memory. The ongoing scholarly conversation touches on efficiency. Was whale oil preferred to seal? Was moss wick superior to cotton grass? Each variation left a different signature of smoke and heat. Archaeologists studying lamp soot still argue over which fuels dominated. The uncertainty lingers, but as you sit here in the glow, you realize arguments matter little to those who simply needed the flame to burn through another night. The lamp crackles softly, the room golden and blue at once. Outside, the blizzard rages, unseen but heard in muted howls. Inside, children lean close, their cheeks glowing, their laughter rising above the hiss of oil. You notice how the lamp draws everyone inward, binding them in a circle. This is not just firelight, it is the architecture of community, forcing people to gather, to share warmth and stories. You rest your hand on the stone rim, feeling its smooth surface warmed by countless nights of use. The quillic is heavy, enduring, carved to last through generations. Imagine it passed from grandmother to granddaughter, each wick-trimming hand part of a chain older than memory. It isn't a mere object but a vessel of continuity, glowing with both practicality and meaning. As you close your eyes, the smell of oil lingers, and the soft flame hums against your eyelids. You understand now that survival isn't only about brute force against the cold. Sometimes, it's about coaxing life from a drop of oil and a scrap of moss, nurturing a fragile glow that grows into a home's heart. And you let that thought sink into you, warming from the inside out, until the howl of the Arctic night feels very far away. The little quillic lamp still flickers in your mind as you walk into the next vision of warmth. The air around you is sharp, but then you hear singing low, rhythmic, chanting that vibrates through your ribs. The sound leads you to a low structure made of bent saplings and covered with hides. Steam curls from the cracks like breath. You step closer and realize you're about to enter a sweat lodge, one of the oldest communal technologies for both heat and spirit. Ethnographers confirm that sweat lodges existed across many native nations, from the plains to the Great Lakes, each with variations, but the same principle. A small enclosed hut, often domed, heated with stones. Water poured onto the stones created bursts of steam so hot you felt it bite your skin. It wasn't merely comfort, it was cleansing, physical and spiritual. Imagine yourself crawling in, shoulders brushing the ground, and then sitting cross-legged in near darkness while the heat rises around you like an invisible tide. What might surprise you is how intensely ritualistic these sessions could be. Participants often fasted beforehand, sang songs, prayed, and treated the sweat not just as therapy but as a meeting with the sacred. You picture the steam hitting your chest, making your skin tingle, and the chants echoing like a drumbeat in your head. This wasn't just about warming up after a freezing day, it was about recalibrating your body and soul. Researchers remain divided on whether sweat lodges were primarily health treatments or spiritual ceremonies. Some emphasize their role in clearing lungs and skin, a kind of primitive sauna useful for winter survival. Others argue the physical benefits were secondary, with the true focus on purification and vision seeking. Was the heat medicine first and ritual second, or the other way around? The scholarly debate still simmers like water on hot stones. You crawl inside, and instantly the world shifts. The hut is small, only big enough for a circle of people, its walls dripping with condensation. The only light comes from the glowing stones in the pit, red veins of fire barely visible in the gloom. Someone ladles water over them, and with a hiss, steam bursts upward, wrapping around you like a wet blanket. Your lungs seize, then expand, and you feel sweat bead on your forehead despite the freezing night outside. The soundscape inside is unlike anything else. Songs echo in the dark, voices layered over the hiss of steam and the crackle of hot rocks. The air tastes mineral-rich, salty, alive. You lean forward, hands on your knees, and realize you are both suffering and soothing yourself at once. The heat strips away discomfort from the cold, replacing it with a different kind of endurance. Curiously, some lodges were built partially underground, dug into the earth for even better insulation. Picture yourself stepping down into a hollow, the walls lined with brush, the ceiling low, hides stretched across poles overhead. The deeper you go, the more enclosed, the hotter it becomes. Even the earth seems to sweat with you. There are stories, too, of sweats used for preparation before hunts, before battles, before major decisions. The logic is simple: purify the body, clear the mind, and emerge renewed. You can almost laugh at the contrast. Outside, frost hardens your eyelashes, while inside, sweat rolls down your cheeks and drips from your chin. Two extremes, both part of survival. The conversation among anthropologists still circles around whether women participated equally, or if sweats were primarily male domains. Accounts differ, some describing female-only lodges, others excluding women entirely. The truth seems to vary by nation, by era, by context. You realize that warmth here was entangled with questions of gender, power, and tradition, as much as with stones and steam. Your body sags under the weight of heat, muscles melting, head spinning lightly. The others around you breathe in rhythm, their chests rising and falling like waves. For a moment, you sense no separation, only one organism sweating together in the dark. You imagine toxins leaving your body, old worries sliding off your skin with each droplet. Outside, the night howls. But inside, you're inside the heart of the earth itself. Hot, damp, alive. When the flap finally opens and you crawl out, the cold air slams against you. Yet instead of freezing, you feel invigorated, your skin steaming as if armored against the frost. The stars overhead seem sharper, brighter, and your lungs drink the icy air with gratitude. You understand now why people return to the sweat lodge again and again, not only for heat but for renewal. It was both survival and ceremony, medicine and memory, wrapped together in one steaming hut. You pull your robe tighter, your skin still warm, and walk away from the lodge. The songs echo faintly behind you, a reminder that warmth was not only about hiding from the cold, but sometimes about facing the heat directly, enduring it, and emerging stronger. That paradox, seeking fire in the dead of snow, is what kept whole communities alive and connected through endless winters. You leave the sweat lodge behind with your skin still tingling, steam rising faintly from your hair as the cold night air bites again. Your body is awake now, humming with heat, and you begin to imagine what it would be like to step into a place where warmth isn't fleeting but woven into the very walls. Southward your thoughts wander, toward desert mesas where the winters still sting but the sun blazes through the day. Here, different hands solved the puzzle of warmth by building with clay, mud, and stone materials that didn't just resist the cold but stored the sun's fire itself. Archaeological surveys confirm that Pueblo peoples constructed adobe dwellings, thick-walled homes of mud, mixed with straw stacked in blocks that looked like giant staircases carved against cliff sides. These houses were more than shelter. They were living batteries. During the day, the adobe walls soaked in heat from sunlight, and at night they slowly released it back, moderating the chill. You picture yourself stepping into one of these rooms at twilight, running your fingers across a wall still faintly warm to the touch, the clay radiating yesterday's sun into your palm. One detail that may surprise you is the use of plaster coatings. After the mud dried, families sometimes smoothed walls with fresh layers of clay or lime, not only to strengthen them but to trap heat better. Some surfaces were even painted in reds and yellows, catching light during the day and glowing faintly at dusk. Imagine sitting in such a room, the walls glowing amber in the firelight, both practical and beautiful, both heat and art at once. Researchers remain split over how much of this heat retention was intentional design versus fortunate coincidence. Some argue that careful observation of sun and shadow guided the placement of walls and windows, creating early passive solar homes. Others think the effect was discovered only after generations of trial and error, with communities gradually realizing that thicker walls equaled warmer nights. The debate is still alive. Were these engineers by plan or by instinct? Either way, the results speak every time a hand brushes against a warm adobe wall at midnight. You climb a ladder into one of the higher rooms, ducking inside. The air smells of earth, damp, rich, faintly dusty, but it is warmer than outside. Furs and woven mats soften the floor, while the fire pit in the center adds just enough flame to push back the dark. The smoke curls upward to a hole in the ceiling, leaving streaks of black across wooden beams. You feel enclosed, embraced by walls that don't merely block cold air but radiate life back into you. Curiously, these same rooms also stayed cooler during scorching desert days, the thick adobe keeping interiors temperate. It's a paradox, walls that could both trap heat and block it. The genius wasn't only in heating but in balancing extremes. Families learned to live in rhythm with the earth's cycles, letting their homes breathe heat in and out like lungs. The scholarly conversations don't end with architecture. Some historians suggest that the clustering of multi-room adobe houses around plazas wasn't just defensive or social, but thermal. Groups of homes shared heat through adjacency, like neighbors leaning together for warmth. Others dismiss that, claiming social organization mattered more than temperature. Which explanation dominates may never be proven, but the thought of warmth radiating not only from walls, but from community rings, true as you sit in the quiet. You glance out the window, really more of a slit carved for light, and see the cliffs glowing under the last light of day. The sandstone holds its own warmth, mirroring the houses built into its sides. A hawk circles overhead, its shadow sliding across the plaza below, where children play even as their breath fogs faintly in the cool air. You sense how survival here was not only about enduring winter but thriving, building towns that stood for centuries. Inside again, you listen to the creak of wooden beams, the soft shuffle of feet on clay floors. A pot hangs near the fire, beans simmering slowly, steam rising with the scent of earth and smoke. The adobe walls seem to sigh, exhaling the heat they've been hoarding all day, wrapping the room in a steady embrace. You close your eyes, lean back against the clay, and feel it warm through your robe like a hand pressed against your shoulder. A little story drifts into your thoughts. Some elders described adobe houses as living beings, their walls needing feeding with fresh plaster each year, their surfaces cared for as one might care for skin. The metaphor makes sense. These weren't lifeless bricks but companions, breathing warmth into long nights, aging with their inhabitants, demanding repair and gratitude. To live in such a house was to be in relationship with earth itself. You linger on that thought as the night deepens. Outside, coyotes yip on the mesas, their cries echoing in the dry air. Inside, the warmth of clay and fire lulls you. It isn't the fierce, immediate blaze of logs, but something subtler, steadier. You understand now why people called these homes not only dwellings but sanctuaries. They held not just bodies, but histories, memories, generations of heat absorbed and returned. When you finally rise, stepping back out into the crisp desert air, you turn once to glance at the glowing windows behind you. The walls stand massive, timeless, yet alive. You realize that in places where trees were scarce and winters still harsh, people didn't simply fight cold, they turned the sun itself into a companion, storing it in earth walls that whispered warmth long after sunset. The desert walls of Adobe fade from your memory as you push northward again, this time into rolling hills and thick forests, where snow piles heavy on branches and rivers harden into glass. Here, warmth was not always about what you built, but where you went. Some families didn't try to fight winter head-on. Instead, they learned to move with the seasons, chasing gentler climates the way migrating birds do. Ethno-historic records make clear that many native groups practiced seasonal migration. The Lakota, for example, followed bison herds across the plains, moving camps to where food was plentiful and winters less brutal. Further east, Algonquian peoples shifted from fishing villages in summer to inland hunting grounds in winter, seeking shelter from coastal winds. You picture yourself trudging alongside such a caravan, belongings lashed to sleds, children riding on travois pulled by dogs. Behind you, the village site grows quiet, snow filling abandoned fire pits, while ahead, the promise of a more forgiving valley calls. One detail that feels both quirky and ingenious is how some families marked their seasonal routes with carved trees or stone piles. Imagine stumbling upon a birch with a symbol cut deep into its bark, pointing like a frozen signpost to the next winter camp. It's almost like an ancient highway marker, except instead of Exit 27, it's turn here for warmth. The thought makes you grin, nature transformed into a travel guide long before roadside billboards existed. Researchers still disagree on the exact reasons behind certain migrations. Was it purely about food, following herds and harvests, or was climate avoidance an equally strong motive? Some argue that winter camps were chosen less for hunting grounds and more for protection from blizzards, south-facing slopes, valleys shielded by trees, caves where wind could not reach. Others insist that sustenance outweighed comfort every time. The argument lingers, reminding you that survival never has one neat explanation. You join the line of travelers in your imagination. The crunch of snow underfoot is softened by layers of fur. Dogs bark as they tug at sleds loaded with hides, tools, and children. Smoke curls from the last lodge behind you, a fading ghost against the horizon. The wind cuts hard across your face, but the thought of a sheltered valley ahead keeps your legs moving. By nightfall, the group reaches a bend in the river, where cliffs rise on three sides, shielding the ground from icy gusts. Here, families set up their winter lodges. Fires spark, hides flap into place, and slowly warmth grows from nothing. You roll out a mat on pine boughs, your back grateful for the softness, and realize the genius of migration. Rather than battle the worst of the season, you simply sidestep it. Curiously, this seasonal rhythm shaped more than warmth. It influenced calendars, ceremonies, and even languages, embedding movement into culture. Songs marked when it was time to leave. Stories reminded where to go. And children grew up measuring time not by months but by journeys. When the river froze, we moved inland. You can almost hear those songs now. Low chants carried on the cold wind, telling of valleys where snow lay thinner, where the sun lingered longer on cliffsides. The scholarly conversation extends into how permanent any camp truly was. Some anthropologists argue that winter lodges, even when well built, were never meant to last more than a season, abandoned as soon as the thaw began. Others suggest families sometimes return to the same sheltered sites year after year, repairing structures, building a kind of cyclical permanence. Was migration endless wandering, or was it a circuit of familiar stops? No single answer covers every nation. The fire crackles in the new camp, its smoke rising into a canopy of branches overhead. The cliffs mute the wind so effectively that you can hear laughter echoing back, warmer than the flames themselves. A child runs past, trailing a strip of hide, her cheeks flushed. You draw your robe tighter and feel a glow, not just from the fire, but from the knowledge that the harshest winds are blunted by geography, chosen with precision generations deep. As you lie down that night, the pine boughs smell sharp, resinous, almost medicinal. You press your cheek against a buffalo hide and feel its rough softness. The stars outside are clear but less cruel, the valley holding you in a pocket of stillness. You drift towards sleep knowing that warmth here is not always about invention. Sometimes it is simply about wisdom, the decision to move, to bend like grass before the storm, rather than stand rigid and break. In the morning, when light spills down the cliffs and paints the snow gold, you rise refreshed. Around you, smoke rises from dozens of fires, a temporary village alive with chatter and the smell of roasted meat. The migration has paid off. Warmth here is gentler, the cold less biting. And as you shoulder your pack, ready for the next move, you realize that survival is not always about staying put. Sometimes it is about knowing when to leave, when to seek warmth not in walls or fires but in the landscape itself. The valley fades from view as you imagine traveling farther, into stretches of land where the wind itself seems to conspire against you. It's not always the freezing air alone that steals your warmth, it's the relentless gusts, carving through every gap in your clothing and tearing heat away from your body faster than any snow ever could. You realize that survival here wasn't only about what you wore or what you built, but about how you redirected the very breath of the earth. Windbreaks, simple yet ingenious, became another shield against winter's cruelty. Historical accounts note that many native groups across the plains and forests constructed barriers of brush, branches, or piled snow to blunt the wind. Imagine standing in the open with no protection. The gale slaps your cheeks raw, pulls at your robe, and whistles into your ears until you're dizzy. Now step behind a wall of woven willow or a stacked ridge of snow, and suddenly the air stills, your robe no longer flapping, your breath not ripped away before it warms your lips. The difference is small but life-saving. One detail that might strike you as oddly resourceful is how some people used buffalo hides stretched across poles as temporary windscreens, a kind of portable wall that could be set up quickly in camp. Picture a hide flapping faintly, the hair side turned inward to catch warmth, while outside the storm rushes past. It's almost like nature's folding screen, except instead of shielding from prying eyes, it shields from the sky itself. You can almost laugh at the improvisation using the same material for bedding, clothing, and now architecture. There's an ongoing discussion among researchers about how deliberately engineered these structures were. Some argue they were strategic, placed with careful attention to prevailing winds, and even shaped to funnel smoke away from campfires. Others suggest they were ad hoc, whatever branches and hides were on hand, thrown together in urgency. Was it design or desperation? The question remains as restless as the winds themselves. You kneel down now behind a wall of brush woven tightly with reeds. The difference is immediate. Your hair no longer whips across your face, and your fingers sting less. The fire at your side burns steadier, its smoke rising in a clean line rather than scattering wildly. The sound changes too. Where moments ago you heard only the endless howl of air, now you hear the crackle of wood, the soft murmurs of voices nearby, even the quiet crunch of snow under someone's boots. Silence, in its own way, is warmth. Curiously, some accounts mention that snow itself became a favorite material for windbreaks. People would pile drifts into crescent shapes around their tents, the hardened crust of snow becoming surprisingly sturdy. You imagine pushing snow with your arms, sculpting it into a barrier taller than yourself, then stepping behind it to find a sudden pocket of calm. The irony makes you smile using the enemy, snow, as an ally. The very thing that chilled your bones also stopped the wind from stealing your heat. As the evening deepens, you sit with others around a fire shielded by one such barrier. Sparks float upward in calm spirals instead of vanishing sideways into the storm. The air around you feels warmer simply because the wind no longer strips it away. You realize warmth isn't only created by fire or body heat. Sometimes it's preserved by denying the cold its easiest weapon. The anthropological debate doesn't end with how they were made. Some scholars suggest windbreaks were temporary, thrown up for a night or two, while others believe certain sites used semi-permanent barriers that lasted whole seasons. The lack of consensus lingers, like a faint draft through a half-sealed flap. Perhaps it depended on the resources available, or the severity of the season, or even the patience of those tasked with weaving branches together. You lean your back against the barrier and close your eyes. It rustles faintly, creaking as wind presses against it, but it holds. You can feel the difference in your body, the steadiness of your breath, the warmth settling deeper into your chest. Someone next to you hums a tune, soft and steady, and you realize that comfort comes not only from flames but from the stillness created around them. Later, as you rise to walk the camp's edge, you see the barriers glowing faintly in firelight, half walls against the darkness. Dogs curl beside them, their fur barely shifting in the calmer air. Children play near the fires, their laughter not ripped away by gusts. You understand now that warmth is not always about creating more heat. Sometimes it is about protecting what little you already have. The night stretches on, but you feel calmer, steadier. The wind howls beyond the barrier, but in here it's only a distant song. You smile at the thought, human hands turning branches, hides, and even snow into walls that deny the storm its full strength. And as you lie back down, your robe wrapped tight, you drift towards sleep with the comforting knowledge that sometimes survival is nothing more than learning how to stand in the lee of the storm. The hush behind the windbreak lingers in your bones, but as dawn arrives you hear another sound, a soft whine, then the muffled thump of paws on snow. Turning, you see shadows moving at the camp's edge, shaggy shapes, ears perked, eyes glinting in the firelight. Dogs, companions, workers, and, in the coldest hours, heaters with 4 legs and wagging tails. You realize quickly that survival here was never only about human ingenuity. Sometimes warmth came on 4 feet, wrapped in fur and loyalty. It's well established that sled dogs and other canines were essential across the north, pulling loads, guarding camps, and sharing the hunt. But their role didn't end with work. Families curled beside them at night, letting their dense coats radiate heat. You picture yourself lying down under robes, and suddenly a heavy body presses against your side, warm breath puffing against your arm. The smell of dog fur, musky and earthy, fills your nose, and you don't mind in the least. Heat is heat, and friendship makes it sweeter. One detail you might find amusing is that some accounts describe dogs taking their sleeping positions with startling precision, paws tucked, tails curled tightly over noses, bodies pressed in arcs that made perfect cushions for children. It's almost as if the animals knew the rules of winter better than people, arranging themselves like living hot water bottles. Children would burrow into their flanks without hesitation, giggling as fur tickled their faces. Researchers still debate how deliberate this relationship was. Did people intentionally breed and encourage dogs for their warmth as much as for labor? Or was it simply a byproduct of cohabitation, an unplanned benefit of living together in cramped shelters? Some scholars argue that Arctic dogs were prized equally as companions and workers, while others insist survival needs outweighed sentimentality. Was that warmth an act of love, or merely necessity? The discussion still circles like paw prints in the snow. You stretch out beside one now, your hand sinking into thick fur that smells faintly of wood smoke and musk. The dog exhales a low groan, shifts closer, and you feel heat seep through your robe into your ribs. Another curls at your feet, trapping warmth around your ankles. Soon, the space becomes a pile of breathing bodies, human and canine, indistinguishable in their shared purpose. Each exhale fogs the cold air, layering into a collective warmth. The sounds are comforting too. The steady rhythm of breathing, the occasional twitch of paws dreaming of hunts, the gentle sighs of children half buried in fur. It feels less like sleeping in a lodge and more like curling up inside a living hearth, each body a glowing coal. The cold still lurks outside, but it cannot break through this barrier of life. Curiously, oral traditions sometimes link dogs to spiritual guardianship. Their warmth was not just physical but protective, keeping bad spirits at bay during vulnerable sleep. Some families believed a child was safer nestled against a dog than left alone, watched by more than teeth and fur. You imagine parents whispering thanks as the animals settled for the night, grateful for both body heat and unseen guardianship. The practical side remained undeniable. A sled dog that could run all day also served as insulation all night. In hunting camps, hunters often shared robes with their best dogs, forming partnerships that blurred the line between species. You picture a hunter rolling out his bedding on frozen ground, then beckoning a dog to curl against him, both falling asleep to the sound of wind muffled by fur. The relationship wasn't sentimentalized the way modern pet owners speak of dogs. It was deeper, forged by shared survival. Of course, not every outsider appreciated the smell or closeness. Early explorers sometimes wrote with disgust about unwashed beasts sharing the bed. But to those who lived here, the arrangement was as natural as breathing. To reject a dog's warmth would have seemed not noble, but foolish. The anthropological conversation continues even today about the exact breeds, sizes, and temperaments of these dogs. Were they all strong sled pullers, or were some smaller companions raised primarily for warmth and hunting aid? Evidence points to variety, with large, wolfish dogs alongside smaller, nimble ones. But regardless of their shapes, their heat and companionship mattered just as much as their muscles. You close your eyes now, pressed against thick fur, feeling the dog's chest rise and fall against your side. Your hand rests on its shoulder, the warmth steady and real. The air in the lodge smells of hide, smoke, and animal musk, a cocktail of survival. Outside, the wind claws at the barrier, but inside, you feel wrapped in a circle of trust. At dawn, when the fire dwindles and frost still laces the air, the dogs rise first, shaking off snow with showers of crystals. Their bodies stretch, tails wag, and they nose at sleeping children to wake them. The warmth they gave through the night is gone, but the memory lingers in your skin, your bones. You smile at the realization that survival here has always been more than human. It has been a pact with other beings, a covenant written in fur and breath. As the camp stirs, sleds are readied, harnesses jingling softly. The dogs yip and bark, eager for the day's work. Their warmth will no longer be in shared bedding but in the trails they carve, the food they help secure, the energy they lend. Yet you know, come nightfall, the cycle will repeat. The hearth will not be a pile of logs, but a pile of bodies human and canine together, sleeping through another long winter night. The barking of the dogs fades into memory as you picture another way people coaxed warmth out of a frozen landscape. This time it isn't through fur or walls or flaps against the wind, but from beneath the very ground itself. You see a circle of figures at dusk, crouched around a pit dug carefully into the earth. Smoke curls upward, faint but steady, and the air carries a savory smell. At first you think they are only preparing food, but then you notice how they linger near the pit even after the meal is gone. The ground beneath their feet is glowing with a hidden ember, the cooking pit that doubled as a radiant heater. Archaeological digs across the continent reveal these earth ovens, shallow depressions lined with hot stones, covered with soil to trap heat. People placed roots, fish, or game inside, layering leaves above to steam them slowly. Hours later, the food was tender and rich, infused with earth's breath. But once the feast was done, the pit remained warm, radiating heat into the night air. You imagine standing over it, toes thawing, as the frost around the rim melts into slush. An oddly charming detail appears in some records. Children often gathered near the pits after cooking, sprawling belly, first across the warm soil the way you might flop onto a heated floor today. Imagine giggling youngsters stretched out like cats, cheeks flushed, as elders half scolded them for hogging the heat. It turns survival into play, warmth as a game of who gets closest without burning their hands. Scholars continue to discuss whether these pits were primarily culinary or equally intended for heating. Some argue the warmth was simply a side effect of cooking, a happy accident that families took advantage of. Others believe the dual purpose was always intentional, that pits were carefully positioned near shelters so their heat would linger overnight. The argument flickers back and forth, like the glow of coals under ash. You crouch beside one now, brushing soil away until heat pricks your palm. The stones beneath are still radiating from the day's fire, warm enough to make you pull back quickly. The scent of roasted tubers hangs in the air, earthy and sweet, blending with wood smoke. Your stomach rumbles, but your body sighs with relief at the heat seeping upward. You spread a robe across the ground and lie down, feeling the warmth rise into your back, more subtle than fire but steadier. The pit becomes more than just utility, it becomes a gathering place. Families circle around not only to eat but to warm hands, to tell stories, to stretch aching limbs. The glowing earth under them feels alive, a heartbeat pulsing through soil. Someone pokes at the edges with a stick, releasing another curl of steam. You close your eyes and breathe it in, the smell comforting, grounding. Curiously, in some regions these pits were dug in long rows, suggesting communal use, perhaps for feasts. You imagine a whole line of steaming mounds glowing under moonlight, a village transformed into a constellation of underground hearths. After the food was lifted out, families sat around, sharing warmth as well as stories. The pits became both kitchen and campfire, but safer, less smoky, less wasteful. Anthropologists sometimes frame these earth ovens as early experiments in controlled heat storage. By heating stones and covering them, people learned to prolong warmth far beyond the fire's visible life. Others counter that the real genius lay not in engineering but in ritual, the act of gathering around something hidden, letting the earth cook and comfort at once. Both views, you suspect, hold truth. As you lie on the robe above the pit, you listen to the murmurs around you. Children laugh, elders hum tunes, and the ground beneath glows with remembered fire. You realize how clever it is, using the same effort that fed your belly to warm your bones. No labor wasted, no energy lost. The earth itself becomes a stove, a heater, and a storyteller. Eventually the coals cool, the soil hardens, and the night presses colder again. But by then you are already asleep, dreams infused with the scent of roasted roots and the sensation of warmth humming upward from the ground. When you wake, frost sparkles on the edges, but the memory of heat lingers in your body. The pit may seem simple, almost primitive to modern eyes, but in truth it embodies a deep wisdom, combining tasks, saving effort, letting nature work twice instead of once. To feed and to warm in the same gesture is not just survival, it is elegance. And as you rise to walk into another night, you understand that sometimes warmth lies not in what you build above the ground, but in what you bury beneath it. The glow of the earth oven fades from your back, leaving only memory, and you trudge onward through snow-muffled fields. The fire within the pit was clever, yes, but not every night could be spent over a buried ember. Sometimes survival was simpler, quieter achieved, not with stone or flame, but with what grew beneath your feet. As you move into a stand of pines, the air fills with a sharp, resinous fragrance. Branches creak overhead, their weight heavy with snow, and the ground is littered with fallen boughs, springy and green even in the heart of winter. These needles and branches, humble as they seem, became another secret of warmth, bedding that lifted the body away from the frozen earth. It's well established from explorers' journals and ethnographic notes that many native communities laid thick mats of pine, spruce, or fir boughs on the ground before sleeping. The reason was simple. The ground steals heat faster than the air. Lie directly on soil or snow, and you feel warmth leaching from your skin like water soaking into sand. But lie on a springy cushion of evergreen, and suddenly the cold slows, trapped by layers of air between needles. Imagine yourself lowering onto such a bed now, the sharp scent filling your nose, the prickly cushions surprisingly soft, and realizing you've created insulation as effective as any modern pad. A quirky image comes to mind from some travelers' accounts. Children leaping onto freshly laid piles of boughs, bouncing and giggling like it was a leafy trampoline. What to adults was vital survival gear became for the young a playground. They would scatter needles everywhere, earning scolding glances, yet the beds still did their job springy, fragrant, and insulating. You can almost see them rolling around, laughing, turning survival into a kind of game. Scholars continue to discuss whether pine boughs were chosen purely for insulation or whether their resinous scent had a secondary purpose. Some suggest the fragrance may have repelled insects even in winter, keeping bedding cleaner. Others argue that the fresh smell carried symbolic meaning, a reminder of life even when snow buried the world. Was it only practical, or was it also psychological? The answer may linger somewhere between, hidden in oral traditions not fully recorded. You kneel now to arrange your own bedding. Layer after layer, you stack the branches until they form a thick mat, the green needles poking but not piercing. You lie back, and instantly the difference strikes you. The ground no longer sucks your heat away. Instead, you feel buoyed above it, like floating on a mattress of forest. The scent soothes you, sharp but calming, the kind of smell that clears lungs and thoughts alike. Each inhale feels cleaner, each exhale heavier, as if your body is already giving in to rest. Above you, smoke from the central fire drifts lazily to the smoke hole, carrying with it that same pine tang. The bedding crackles faintly when you shift, releasing little bursts of fragrance. You think of how modern campers carry foam pads, synthetic gear, but here, the forest itself provides. Every step in the snow is a potential blanket, every branch a barrier against frost. Curiously, some families line not only the floor but also the walls with evergreen boughs, weaving them into mats that added another layer of insulation. Imagine a lodge with walls breathing out the smell of pine, every surface fragrant, the air thick with forest even as blizzards raged outside. To lie in such a place would be to forget the barren cold for a moment, wrapped instead in the eternal greenness of the trees. The anthropological debate continues on whether bedding was replaced daily or left for weeks at a time. Some argue that fresh boughs were added often, both for cleanliness and for renewed insulation. Others believe beds could last through whole seasons, flattened but still serviceable. The truth likely varied, but the question itself highlights how much attention was required to maintain warmth. Even beds were active, tended, renewed, not passive conveniences. As the fire dies lower, you sink deeper into the mat, its spring holding you aloft. The needles poke gently, reminding you of their presence, but your back thanks them for every layer. Around you, others stir, pulling hides over themselves, their breath rising in soft clouds. The scent of pine wraps you like a lullaby, whispering that the forest has not abandoned you, even in deepest winter. You close your eyes, listening to the quiet crackle beneath you, the faint drip of melting snow from beams overhead. Your skin feels warmer, your bones less weary. It's not just the fire or the robes, it's the bed itself, the cushion of evergreen that keeps the cold earth at bay. And in that moment, you understand how warmth often comes, not in grand inventions, but in quiet layers, in details so simple they might be overlooked by anyone not forced to depend on them. When dawn finally breaks, you rise and brush needles from your hair and robe. The bed has flattened but still smells sharp, still holds the memory of heat. You smile at the realization that even the forest floor could become a partner in survival, lending its branches for rest and warmth. And as you step outside into the snow once more, you carry the fragrance with you, a reminder that warmth sometimes lies not in fire, not in stone, but in the living green resilience of trees. The resinous fragrance of pine fades as you trudge onward, snow crunching beneath your moccasins. A new thought nags at you now. Fires are never permanent. Flames die, smoke drifts, wood burns out. Matches don't exist, and flint isn't always at hand. In the cold, you cannot afford to waste hours sparking a flame from scratch. What if the fire could be carried with you, hidden and guarded like a secret ember? That idea shaped yet another method of staying warm, the art of transporting living fire across the miles. Ethnographic notes and oral histories alike describe how many native communities preserved glowing coals from one fire to the next. Bark, buffalo horn, or bundles of fungus served as containers, protecting fragile embers while still letting them breathe. You imagine crouching at the edge of a dying campfire, scooping glowing fragments into a hollowed-out piece of wood, wrapping it with damp moss to keep sparks alive without bursting into flame. You sling it under your robe like a treasure, the warmth radiating faintly against your side as you walk through snow. A curious little detail emerges from explorers' journals. Some travelers described women carrying embers inside decorated pouches, almost like handbags of fire. The image is both practical and absurdly stylish. Imagine clutching a smoldering coal bag the way modern people clutch a thermos of coffee. It kept hands warm while also ensuring the next hearth could be lit in seconds. You can't help but grin at the thought portable central heating, centuries before batteries or butane lighters. Among scholars, there is still debate about how widespread ember carrying truly was. Some suggest it was universal, a daily routine whenever families moved camp. Others argue it was situational, used primarily in deep winter when ignition was risky, or when journeys crossed treeless regions where tinder was scarce. Was every traveler a walking firekeeper, or only certain people tasked with the duty? The question remains open, smouldering like the coals themselves. You lift a bundle of bark and moss in your hands now, feeling the faint heat seep into your palms. The ember inside glows faintly, pulsing like a heart. Each step you take crunches, snow underfoot, but the bundle radiates a secret summer. The smell of charred wood leaks out, mixing with the cold air, a reminder that fire has not abandoned you even as the wind gnaws at your cheeks. At night, you arrive in a new clearing, the camp hastily assembled. Instead of bow drilling sparks from dry sticks, someone opens their ember pouch, breathes gently, and lays the glowing coal into dry grass. With a single puff, flame leaps back into being. The camp roars to life with fire in minutes, warmth blossoming as children crowd close. You marvel at how this small act, so simple, transforms danger into comfort. Carrying fire is not only clever, it is the difference between survival and frostbite. Curiously, embers were also carried for ceremonial reasons. Some traditions held that fire from a sacred hearth should never die, its coals carried from camp to camp as a living thread of continuity. To let it go out was to sever a tie with ancestors. You imagine the reverence with which a bundle of coals was handled, not just a tool, but a holy relic, glowing softly through migrations and seasons. Practical considerations mattered too. Carried fire reduced smoke inhalation, since fires didn't need to be constantly restarted with damp wood. It saved time and energy, sparing numb fingers from the exhausting work of friction, fire starting in freezing winds. You think about how modern hikers boast of fire starters and lighters, yet here was a technology equally effective walking through snow with a pouch of glowing life tucked beneath your robe. Researchers also debate whether ember carrying reduced reliance on tools like bow drills and fire saws. Some argue the old ignition methods became rare once people discovered how reliable ember bundles were. Others believe they coexisted, with embers serving as convenience but not replacement. The disagreement lingers, like two sparks glowing in different corners of history. You imagine yourself bedding down for the night, your ember bundle placed carefully beside you. It glows faintly in the dark, like a tiny sun asleep under bark. The warmth is subtle, not enough to cook or heat a shelter, but enough to remind you that dawn will bring fire without struggle. You fall asleep to its slow pulse, soothed by the knowledge that flame has already been captured, ready to bloom again when needed. When morning comes, frost hangs on your lashes, but your ember still glows. You kneel, feed it dry twigs, and breathe gently. Flames rise, your hands glow orange, and the cold pulls back. You realize then that fire is not only heat but continuity, a thread woven across days and miles. To carry it is to carry life itself, guarded in a pouch of moss and bark. And as you sling the bundle across your shoulder, stepping out into another day of snow and silence, you know you are not walking into emptiness. You carry a sun in your pocket, a hidden ally glowing with each step, whispering warmth through even the coldest night. The ember bundle warms your side as you walk, but your eyes drift to the seams of your clothing, to the way every piece holds tight against the cold. You begin to notice that the difference between comfort and frostbite often lies not in how much fur you wear, but in how well it's stitched together. The art of sewing, humble as it sounds, becomes your next revelation. Sinew pulled tight through hide, bone needles glinting by firelight, clothing engineered not by factories but by human patience. Archaeological finds across North America confirm that bone, antler, and even sharpened bird bones served as needles for millennia. Sinew, the fibrous tissue from animal tendons, was stripped, dried, and split into threads, both strong and flexible. You picture yourself sitting cross-legged near the fire, robe pulled close, as someone threads a bone needle with sinew and begins the rhythmic work of stitching moccasins. Each pull squeaks faintly, tightens neatly, and leaves a seam nearly waterproof. Without such precision, warmth leaks away through gaps. With it, your body becomes a fortress. One strangely charming note from explorers' journals is how children were sometimes tasked with chewing sinew before it was used, softening the fibers into pliable thread. Imagine a circle of youngsters gnawing on strips of tendon, making faces at the taste, spitting out strings for mothers to sew with. It's both comical and practical, tiny jaws preparing the very material that kept the family warm. Researchers are still divided over how standardized these sewing techniques were. Some argue every family had their own preferred stitches, inherited like heirlooms, while others believe trade and intermarriage spread sewing patterns across vast regions. Was your parka stitched in a unique family style, or could anyone recognize it from 100 miles away? The evidence is patchy, and the debate lingers like loose thread waiting to be tied. You hold a moccasin in your hands now, fur turned inward, hide stitched so tight that no snow seeps through. Your fingers trace the seam, marveling at the neatness. Each stitch is a heartbeat, each loop an affirmation of survival. Slip your foot inside, and instantly you feel the difference. No draft sneaks in, no ice crunches against skin. You walk across snow and your toes stay warm, cushioned by fur and protected by sinew's strength. The smell of hide fills the lodge as sewing continues around you. Needles click softly against bone, sinew threads slide with a whisper, and laughter bubbles up as women and men alike joke over the work. Clothing isn't made in silence. It is stitched to the rhythm of voices, songs, stories. You imagine a grandmother humming as she patches a sleeve, her melody weaving into the garment as surely as the sinew does. Curiously, sewing was not only utilitarian, but often decorative. Beads, shells, quills, and later glass beads were worked into seams, adding beauty to necessity. Imagine pulling on a winter parka and seeing not only fur but also gleaming patterns stitched across the chest, warmth doubled with artistry. Some argue such decoration had symbolic meaning, signifying clan, spirit guides, or achievements, while others suggest it was simply the joy of making something beautiful in a world of snow. Either way, It proves that survival and style were not strangers. The academic debate continues about whether men or women primarily handled winter sewing. Some traditions clearly describe sewing as women's domain, while others emphasize men stitching their own hunting gear. Perhaps the truth lies in practicality. Whoever had the time and skill took up the needle, for cold did not wait on gender roles. What mattered was that seams were strong, garments sealed, warmth preserved. You picture the long hours this required. No machines, no shortcuts, just fingers pulling sinew through hide by lamplight. Your own hands would grow stiff, perhaps pricked raw by bone needles, yet the result was worth it. A coat that trapped body heat, mittens that laughed at frost, leggings that hugged your calves against the wind. You understand now that each stitch was not small but monumental, each knot a barrier against death itself. At night, you slip into a full outfit of such gear, fur hood brushing your face, seams snug around wrists and ankles. The fire may flicker low, but your body stays warm. Even lying still, you feel the protection stitched into every line. The smell of hide, the faint creak of sinew, the softness of fur, these are the lullabies of survival. Curiously, some garments were made double-layered, fur facing inward for warmth, another hide facing outward to shed snow. It's the same principle modern mountaineers use with base layers and shells, only here perfected without textbooks. You shift in your parka, marveling at how dry and warm you stay even when snow clings to your shoulders. The lesson is clear. Warmth is not just about bulk, but about smart design, about sealing every opening against the cold's eager fingers. When morning comes, you watch the camp stir, everyone pulling on garments stitched through nights of patient labor. Children tug at their boots, adults tighten belts, hunters adjust hoods. The sound of sinew creaking faintly under stress tells you all you need to know. Warmth will hold, seams will not betray them. As you step into the crisp air, the wind bites but fails to penetrate. You smile, realizing your survival is written in threads, tiny strands of sinew linking hide to hide, one loop at a time. No fire burns forever, no wall blocks every draft, but stitches endure, holding warmth as faithfully as memory. And you walk forward knowing that every seam around you is a promise, a small bond that stands between your body and the endless winter outside. The seams of sinew-stitched moccasins still hug your feet as you tread forward, but soon another glow beckons you, this time brighter, louder, alive with movement. You hear laughter, the beating of drums, and the low thrum of voices weaving together. You step into a wide clearing where a fire blazes, its sparks shooting upward into the cold night sky. This is no quiet ember bundle, no secret pit oven. It is a ceremonial fire, tended not only for survival but for spirit, for the warmth of a community bound in rhythm. Ethnographic descriptions and oral traditions affirm that many native nations held dances and ceremonies around great fires, especially in the dark of winter. These fires were more than practical, they marked the center of communal life. Picture a circle of lodges around you, each with its own small hearth, yet everyone gathering here in one space where flames leapt higher than any home's roof. You walk closer, and the cold recedes as the heat washes over your face, your cheeks glowing as shadows stretch across the snow. A delightful, almost playful image appears in some accounts. Children darting close to the fire, daring each other to leap across its lowest edges, their moccasins leaving blackened streaks of soot. Elders scold them, voices stern, but laughter betrays the affection underneath. What to you might seem reckless play was, for them, a way of testing courage and embracing the warmth with joy. Scholars remain divided over the exact functions of these winter fires. Some argue they were strictly spiritual, reserved for ceremonies invoking protection, fertility, or the return of the Sunday. Others contend they carried equal weight as practical gatherings, letting people share news, trade goods, and reinforce bonds. Was the fire holy or homely? The truth, perhaps, is that it was both, sacred and mundane, feeding souls as much as it fed bodies. You settle at the edge of the circle now, the snow beneath you stamped flat by countless feet. The fire's roar drowns out the wind, and the smell of resinous wood fills your nose, sharper than the smoke of grass or dung fires in smaller shelters. Sparks leap upward, golden and wild, vanishing into a sky powdered with stars. Someone begins to sing, their voice carrying over the crackle, joined by another, then another. Soon the whole circle hums with harmony, the fire itself keeping time. The heat is not only physical, it is collective. You feel it in the laughter that ripples outward, in the stomp of feet against frozen ground, in the pounding of drums that echo in your ribs. You realize that warmth here is inseparable from belonging. Alone by a fire you survive. Together by a fire you thrive. Curiously, fires in such settings often burned with careful structure. Some groups arranged logs in crisscross patterns, feeding the blaze evenly through the night. Others used ring-shaped pits to contain embers, ensuring sparks did not leap into nearby hides. There was art in tending the flame, and those who mastered it held respect. A careless firekeeper risked smoke, sparks, or collapse. A skilled one made the difference between chaos and comfort. As you watch the circle sway in rhythm, you sense how the fire becomes more than heat, it becomes a stage. Dancers leap, their shadows stretching huge against the snow, their robes flashing red and gold in the flickering light. Children sit wide-eyed, warmed as much by the spectacle as by the flame itself. Elders nod solemnly, their faces half-lit, half-shadowed, as stories and prayers weave into the night. The scholarly debate also touches on whether such fires symbolized cosmic cycles. Some anthropologists see them as embodiments of the sun, rekindled at winter solstice ceremonies to promise the world's renewal. Others push back, saying not every flame was cosmic. Sometimes a fire was just a fire. Yet watching sparks climb skyward, you can feel why people would link this glow to celestial rhythms. The fire is, after all, a piece of the sun stolen to earth, burning defiantly in the coldest season. You inch closer, your face flushed with heat even as your back prickles from the night air. The fire breathes, alive, its logs collapsing inward with deep groans, embers tumbling like tiny stars across the snow. Someone tosses herbs into the blaze, and a new scent rises, sweetgrass or sage, its smoke curling in fragrant spirals. People lean into it, letting the scent wash their faces, brushing hands through smoke as if gathering blessings. Warmth here is no longer just physical but layered with meaning, each puff of fragrant smoke a benediction. The hours slip past, but the fire never dies. As the circle tires, new logs are added, new voices rise. Even those who drowse near its edge wake again when sparks burst high, laughter returning as if drawn by flame. The community beats with the fire's pulse, bodies swaying, cheeks glowing, hearts lifted. At last, when dawn glimmers faintly on the horizon, the fire still roars, its embers glowing with the weight of an entire night's devotion. You step back, body warm, ears ringing with drums and chants. The cold air nips, but you hardly notice. You've absorbed something more enduring than firewood's heat. You've absorbed the warmth of belonging, the glow of people gathered as one. You walk away with smoke clinging to your hair, sparks still dancing in your vision, and you realize, in winter, survival was never just about hiding from the cold. It was about building fires large enough for everyone, fires that fed not only hands but spirits, fires that turned icy nights into living memory. The echoes of drums and laughter fade, leaving only the faint tang of smoke in your nose. Your body is still warm from the ceremonial fire, but the wind reminds you that warmth cannot always come from flames or furs. Sometimes the cold is not just something to be fought externally, it seeps through your skin, biting deeper. In such moments, another strategy emerges, one that might seem strange to you now, but made perfect sense to those who lived close to the land, sealing the body itself against the wind with grease and oil. It is documented in travelers' accounts and Inuit traditions that seal, whale, or fish oil was rubbed into skin as both protection and insulation. The layer of fat slowed evaporation of sweat, preventing wind from chilling the skin too quickly, and it added a barrier against raw air. Imagine dipping your hand into a pot of thick, pungent oil, rubbing it over your arms, your face, even your cheeks until your skin gleams. The smell clings. Yes, fishy, heavy, but the sting of icy wind softens immediately. A curious little anecdote from Northern records describes children laughing as they smeared grease on each other's noses, shiny and slick, turning protection into a kind of winter game. Their faces glowed like polished stones, and though outsiders might wrinkle their noses at the odor, the children didn't mind. To them, the smell was not foul but familiar, a fragrance of safety. Researchers still dispute how effective this practice really was. Some argue that oil layers created genuine insulation, akin to the waterproofing effect in animals like seals or otters. Others insist it offered more psychological comfort than physical warmth, with only limited benefits in harsh cold. Did the grease truly keep out frostbite, or did it simply make people feel less exposed? The debate lingers, slippery as the oil itself. You lean closer to a stone lamp now, watching as a woman scoops melted seal fat into a small container. She dips her fingers and smooths the oil across her child's face, humming softly. The child squirms, laughing, but soon his cheeks gleam under the lamplight. You touch your own skin, imagining that greasy layer, and notice how the wind biting at your lips eases almost instantly. The oil seals in moisture, locking away the last bit of body heat. The sensation is odd. Your face feels heavy, tacky, the scent clinging to every breath. Yet the warmth outweighs discomfort. You realize quickly that survival often means sacrificing preference, smelling like fish to outlast the frost, trading cleanliness for safety. In the dark of winter, practicality is its own perfume. Curiously, the use of grease wasn't limited to skin. Hunters sometimes coated the insides of boots with fat, softening hides and adding insulation. Others waterproofed seams with a thin smear, turning moccasins into better shields against snow. You imagine rubbing oil into every crack of your clothing until your entire outfit gleams faintly in the firelight, a walking barrier against winter. The scholarly conversation also explores symbolic layers. Some anthropologists suggest oiling the body was linked with ritual blessing the skin as much as protecting it. Others downplay that, insisting it was strictly utilitarian. But the duality is tempting. Warmth, both physical and spiritual. Grease acting as shield against cold and against ill fortune alike. You close your eyes and picture lying down on a robe, skin shining under the glow of fire. The oil makes you smell like the sea, like the animals whose lives sustained yours. There is intimacy in that connection, a reminder that survival was never solitary but always entwined with the creatures hunted, the lamps fueled, the coats stitched. You carry their warmth on your very skin. At dawn, when the wind cuts sharper, you step outside. Your face still glistens, cheeks slippery against the air, and you notice how frost forms more slowly on your eyelashes. The others beside you gleam as well, their skin glossy in the rising sunday. To a stranger, it might seem odd or unclean. To you, it is simply another kind of armor, one that cannot be torn by wind or soaked by snow. You smile faintly at the realization. Fire may warm you for hours, furs may protect you for seasons, but grease pressed into your skin gives warmth that walks with you. It is humble, sticky, pungent, but enduring, and as you rub one last smear across your cheek, you understand that sometimes survival is not about comfort at all. It is about accepting what works, even when it clings to you long after the fire fades. The sheen of oil still lingers on your cheeks, the smell clinging faintly as you push further into the landscape of memory. The night is deep, the wind bitter, and suddenly the terrain changes. Ahead rises a dark mouth in the hillside, a jagged gap in stone that breathes a faint draught. You hesitate at the entrance, but curiosity urges you forward. The ground crunches underfoot, and you step into the dim hollow of a cave. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence alike tell us that caves and natural rock shelters offered sanctuary for many native communities during harsh winters. The appeal was obvious. Thick stone walls blocked wind, and the constant underground temperature stayed steadier than the exposed air outside. Imagine yourself walking into one now, the air cooler at first, almost damp, yet far less biting than the gale behind you. The silence presses close, the stones swallowing sound, and you realize you've stepped into nature's own insulation. One detail that feels oddly charming is the sight of smoke-darkened ceilings discovered in long-used caves. Generations of fires had left black stains curling upward, ancient graffiti of survival. Picture families gathered beneath those marks, their flames flickering below, each new hearth adding another layer to the ceiling's story. It's a record not written in ink but in soot, a diary of heat stretching across centuries. Researchers remain divided about how heavily caves were used as permanent winter dwellings versus temporary refuges. Some argue that they were fallback shelters, visited only when other homes failed. Others insist certain communities made them central to seasonal life, especially in regions where cliffs and hollows were plentiful. Was the cave a backup plan or a primary home? The answer is buried in layers of ash, still debated today. You walk deeper into the cave now, the walls cold and rough beneath your palm. The ground slopes gently, and you see where stones have been arranged in a shallow circle, the remnant of an ancient hearth. The smell of damp earth mingles with faint traces of char, as if the rock itself still remembers fire. You crouch, strike flint against steel, and coax flame back to life. Instantly the chamber glows, shadows leaping high across uneven walls. The warmth spreads slowly, not like the sudden burst of a bonfire, but like a tide rising against stone. The air grows softer, less cruel. You pull your robe tighter and settle on a bed of pine boughs laid against the floor. The fire crackles, echoing, its sound amplified until it feels as though the cave itself is humming. Curiously, some oral traditions describe caves as homes not only for people, but for spirits, guardians, or ancestors. Entering such a space was both practical and symbolic, a step into the earth's womb. You can almost feel that now the cave embracing you, protective but also humbling. The warmth of the fire mingles with the weight of silence, making you aware that you are a guest in something older than yourself. The scholarly discussion extends to whether smoke ventilation posed problems in these enclosed spaces. Some argue families carefully chose caves with natural cracks or high ceilings to let fumes escape. Others think smoke was tolerated, with people crouching low in breathable layers while blackening the rock above. Which version is true may depend on the cave, the season, or simply the stubbornness of the people within. You lean back against the wall, your spine pressed to stone warmed faintly by the fire's reflection. It feels solid, steady, as if nothing outside, no storm, no wind, no blizzard could breach this shield. The darkness beyond the firelight seems infinite, yet the circle of heat holds firm. Children curl on robes, their cheeks ruddy, their breaths rising in white clouds that dissolve into smoke. A dog shifts beside you, sighing into sleep. The cave fills with the small sounds of life continuing despite winter's hunger. The flames reveal carvings on the wall, scratches of animals, lines etched by hands long gone. Were they decoration, prayers, or idle marks made while warming by the fire? You wonder, tracing them with your eyes, realizing that warmth often inspired more than survival. It inspired expression, the urge to leave a mark, to say, I was here, and I endured. As the night deepens, you notice how the fire's glow softens stone, making the cave appear almost alive. Shadows pulse, corners breathe, ceilings drip faintly as ice melts. You feel cocooned, not by furs or hides, but by earth itself, its body sheltering yours. It is a different kind of warmth, slower, deeper, less about heat and more about stability. The storm outside can rage for days, but here inside the cave, you belong to the patient rhythm of stone and fire. When dawn comes, you step back into the open air. Frost slaps your face, but you carry the memory of the cave with you, its warmth still humming in your chest. You glance back once at the dark entrance, smoke curling faintly from within, and know it is more than a hollow in rock. It is a witness, a protector, a place where generations bent the cold to their will with nothing more than fire and faith. The cave shadow lingers behind you, but soon another kind of shelter takes form in your mind, one not carved by nature but woven by hand. Picture yourself stepping into a winter dwelling, lined not only with hides but with layer upon layer of mats and blankets, some of reeds, others of feathers, still others quilted from scraps of fur. Here warmth was not just about walls but about softness, about piling texture upon texture until cold had nowhere left to creep. Historical descriptions confirm that many native communities crafted bedding and coverings from reeds, cattails, and woven grasses, sometimes layered beneath hides to trap air. In other regions, feathers were stitched into blankets, creating a downy insulation remarkably like modern comforters. Imagine lying beneath such a blanket now, the weight pressing gently against your chest, each feather capturing a pocket of heat. The cold outside may shriek, but inside your cocoon you hear only your own steady breathing. A curious little detail emerges from stories of the Northeast. Mats woven from cattails were sometimes used not just as floor coverings but stacked thick against walls for extra insulation. Imagine a lodge with walls that smell faintly of wetland, reeds drying into golden panels, transforming what once rustled in marshes into armor against snow. Children might pluck at the mats absent-mindedly, releasing the scent of summer even in January. The idea feels almost whimsical, marsh plants whispering warmth into frozen nights. Anthropologists continue to discuss how feather blankets were distributed. Some argue they were luxuries, reserved for families with access to abundant waterfowl. Others believe they were more widespread, crafted collectively during autumn hunts when geese and ducks filled the skies. Were such blankets treasures only for the fortunate, or common goods woven through community labor? The debate remains open, a puzzle of feathers and memory. You run your hand over one such quilt now, the surface soft, slightly uneven, stitched with sinew in irregular patterns. The feathers inside shift subtly as you press, sighing back into place when you release. You lie down beneath it, and the weight settles over you like a protective hand. Warmth grows quickly, almost too quickly, until you push a corner back for a breath of cool air. The blanket smells faintly of bird and smoke, not unpleasant but earthy, grounding you in the rhythms of the hunt. Around you, others settle as well. A baby fusses until wrapped in a miniature version of the quilt, immediately soothed into sleep. An elder stretches out on reed mats piled thick beneath him, sighing as the pressure eases his bones. The mats creak faintly, the feathers rustle, and the room becomes a chorus of soft sounds, nothing like the howl of wind outside. Curiously, some accounts describe blankets dyed in bright colors, with natural pigments, reds from clay, blacks from charred wood, yellows from ochre. These weren't only tools of survival, they were canvases of expression. Imagine feathers glowing with ochre under firelight, transforming a simple quilt into something festive, celebratory, even in the dead of winter. Beauty here wasn't separate from warmth, it was woven right into it. The scholarly discussion also touches on how many layers were typical. Some suggest 2 or 3 blankets sufficed, while others describe stacks so heavy they pinned sleepers like stones. Perhaps the answer lay in preference, or in how fierce the winter raged that year. You picture yourself under a mountain of hides and feathers, unable to move but perfectly content, the weight itself a comfort. As you settle deeper beneath the layers, you realize warmth here is as much about psychology as physics. The softness soothes nerves, the smell recalls summer marshes, the weight presses away anxiety. You drift toward sleep faster than you expected, lulled by the hush of feathers and the steady breathing of those around you. In the morning, when you push the blanket aside, the cold rushes in sharply. But for a few hours at least, you lived in a world sealed off from winter, a bubble of softness against the hard edge of frost. And you smile at the thought that survival could sometimes feel not only safe but comfortable, even indulgent. You rise, stretch, and fold the mats neatly, their edges frayed but serviceable. The feathers fluff back into place, ready for another night. As you step outside, the cold nips at your skin again, but you carry with you the memory of warmth layered in reeds and feathers, a reminder that even the humblest plants and the lightest plumes can defy the deepest snow when woven with care. The comfort of feather quilts and cattail mats fades as you press further into a harsher vision. The wind stiffens, snow begins to fall in heavy, swirling curtains, and soon the land itself disappears beneath white. No lodge, no adobe wall, no cave stands nearby. Only an endless sweep of snow and your own pounding heartbeat. In moments like this, survival depended on something fast, improvised, and astonishingly effective: the snow trench. Accounts from explorers and oral traditions alike describe how people caught in storms dug shallow pits or trenches into drifts, shaping quick shelters that trapped warmth. The principle is simple. Snow, though cold to the touch, insulates by holding air within its crystals. You drop to your knees now, your hands numb as you scoop away snow, digging furiously until the trench is shoulder deep. The storm howls above you, but inside the hollow the wind dies almost instantly, leaving you in a pocket of muffled quiet. An oddly humorous detail appears in some accounts. People sometimes nicknamed these sudden shelters snow coffins, when joking among themselves, dark humor in the face of danger. Imagine lying in one, peeking out at the blizzard, muttering a laugh even as your teeth chatter. It's macabre, yes, but also practical humor, the kind that makes fear easier to bear. Scholars continue to discuss whether snow trenches were used only in emergencies or as semi-regular overnight shelters during long hunts. Some argue they were strictly last resorts, dug when hunters were caught too far from camp. Others suggest they were part of planned journeys, efficient in open tundra where carrying tents was burdensome. The uncertainty remains, like drifting snow covering tracks. You crouch inside your trench now, walls glistening faintly in dim light. You line the bottom with pine boughs scavenged quickly, or maybe with robes rolled beneath you. The difference is instant. No icy ground stealing your heat, only a cushion that lets your body warm the air around you. You pull a buffalo hide over your shoulders, and within minutes the pocket of space grows noticeably warmer. Your own breath fogs the air, clinging to the walls until frost crystals sparkle. The soundscape is strange. Outside, the storm screams like a beast. Inside, it is muffled, dulled to a faint hum. Snow absorbs noise as well as wind, creating a silence so profound it feels like the world itself has paused. You curl tighter, listening to your own heartbeat, feeling warmth slowly gather. What seemed like a grave moments ago begins to feel like a womb. Curiously, some traditions describe hunters sleeping in these trenches alongside dogs, their combined heat raising the temperature dramatically. Imagine a man and his animals pressed together in a shallow snow hollow, steam rising from their breaths, the storm forgotten just inches away. The trench is no palace, but it doesn't need to be. It buys life, one night at a time. The debate also extends to how dangerous these shelters could be. Some scholars note the risk of collapse if snow crust weakened, or suffocation if ventilation holes weren't poked. Others argue the risks were minimal compared to the certainty of freezing in open air. Was the snow trench a miracle or a gamble? Both, perhaps, depending on skill and luck. You lie down fully now, the trench pressing close around you. The cold is still present, but no longer unbearable. Your robe holds heat, your breath warms the pocket, and your body begins to relax. You realize that this is warmth redefined, not luxury, not comfort, but survival measured in degrees. The snow itself, once enemy, has become your ally. As dawn creeps grey across the horizon, you crawl out, brushing frost from your hair. The trench behind you looks unassuming, just another dip in the snow, soon to vanish with the next drift. Yet to you it feels monumental. It was a coffin that became a cradle, a last resort that delivered you to morning. You stretch, stiff but alive, and smile faintly at the irony. Snow, which chills, also saves. Cold, which kills, also shelters. The world is full of contradictions, and survival belongs to those willing to dig into them literally. You walk on, leaving the trench to fill with drifting snow, carrying with you the knowledge that sometimes the simplest of shelters, carved with desperate hands, holds the greatest warmth of all. The memory of the snow trench clings to you as you walk on, but now the wind softens. You hear not the shriek of storms, but the faint trickle of water beneath ice. Soon you arrive at a cluster of domed lodges along a riverbank, their smoke curling gently into the cold air. These are not simple wigwams or temporary hides, but something sturdier, warmer, and unmistakably communal: the longhouse. Historical evidence shows that Iroquoian peoples and other northeastern nations built immense longhouses, stretching 50 to 100 feet, with wooden frames covered in bark. Step inside one, and you step into a village under a single roof. The air smells of smoke and roasted corn, and rows of hearths flicker down the central aisle, each fire tended by its own family. Dozens of people live together here, their warmth layering into one steady climate. A detail that might make you grin is how early European visitors sometimes complained about the noise inside: children laughing, dogs barking, elders talking over each other. Imagine lying down with smoke in your eyes, heat from the nearest hearth warming your side, while the chatter of 3 families washes over you like a living lullaby. To outsiders it may have seemed chaotic. To those within, it was harmony, warmth made audible. There is still disagreement among scholars about how well these longhouses held heat. Some argue the bark walls and overlapping mats created effective insulation, trapping fire warmth inside. Others claim drafts slipped easily through gaps, with smoke escaping too quickly through roof vents. Were these halls cozy havens or smoky barns? The truth likely lies in the balance: warm enough to survive, drafty enough to keep air breathable. You step through the doorway now, brushing past a hanging mat that keeps the cold at bay. Inside, the glow of multiple fires surprises you. Each hearth flickers upward, its smoke funneling toward roof slits. Families sit around them, robes wrapped tight, children leaning against parents. The heat from one fire might not suffice, but multiplied by many, the effect becomes unmistakable. You unfasten your robe slightly, cheeks flushed, realizing how human presence itself is fuel. The sounds envelop you: pots clanging, dogs shifting, voices weaving together. The walls creak under wind, but the building holds, its frame sturdy, its bark siding toughened by years of weather. You sit on a bench lined with hides and stretch your feet toward a glowing hearth. The ground is earthen, worn smooth by countless steps, but its familiarity feels grounding. Curiously, longhouses were more than shelters. They were political and spiritual centers. Councils gathered here, decisions made by the glow of shared fires. Some anthropologists suggest that warmth itself reinforced these discussions. When you've survived the cold together, compromise feels more natural. The hearth became both literal and symbolic center, uniting families into clans, clans into nations. You lean back against a post, its bark smooth where hands have rested for decades. A woman beside you stirs a pot of stew, its steam rising fragrant with corn and squash. Children sneak tastes, grinning as elders pretend not to notice. The laughter is warm in itself, mingling with the heat of the fire until you no longer know where survival ends and joy begins. Scholars debate whether the communal nature of longhouses compromised privacy or strengthened bonds. Some argue constant closeness bred tension, while others highlight the resilience that came from sharing burdens. Was warmth offset by crowded air? Or was crowdedness the very thing that ensured warmth? The question remains unanswered, but as you sit here now, surrounded by bodies and voices, you feel safe, not suffocated. The walls absorb heat slowly, holding it like thick bark blankets. At night, when fires dim, the air cools but never to the biting levels outside. Dozens of bodies breathe warmth into the room, and the sheer scale of the structure becomes its insulation. You stretch out beneath a robe, listening to snores mixing with crackling coals, and think, here is warmth born of numbers, of trust, of lives entwined beneath one roof. When morning arrives, smoke still lingers in your nose, your hair heavy with its scent, yet your skin glows, your body rested. Outside, frost clings to trees, but inside, the embers of so many hearths refuse to die. You step back into the cold and glance behind. The longhouse looms like a fortress of bark, not elegant, not silent, but enduring. You smile at the realization. Warmth here was not only the sum of fires but of families, each flame a note in a greater harmony. And you walk on knowing that sometimes the truest insulation is not bark or fur, but the decision to gather close and share the same roof, the same stories, the same heat. The echoes of voices in the longhouse fade, and once again you find yourself under an open sky. The air is sharp enough to sting, and the ground groans under the weight of frost. You pull your robe tighter, and imagine what it would be like to hunt in such weather, far from communal fires, with only your wits to keep you alive. It's in these lonely stretches that you realize another vital secret of warmth: movement itself. Sometimes the best furnace was not a hearth or a hide, but your own restless body. Historical accounts emphasize how native hunters and travelers kept warm by walking, running, or working through the cold. Motion created heat, and idleness bled it away. You picture yourself trudging through snow, legs pumping, arms swinging, breath rising in plumes. Your cheeks flush, your heart quickens, and though the air bites, your core grows warm. To stand still would be misery. To move is salvation. A curious little note comes from explorers who joined native guides on long treks. They complained of exhaustion while their companions seemed invigorated, even laughing as they jogged lightly across snow. One diary mentions a guide, joking that the best blanket was your own legs moving. You can almost hear that laughter now, cutting through the whine of wind, a reminder that heat can be summoned from inside as surely as from fire. Scholars remain divided about how deliberately this was understood as a survival strategy. Some argue it was instinct, of course, you moved to stay warm. Others suggest it became cultural wisdom, passed down as lessons. Don't sit too long, don't let your blood slow, walk while others huddle. Was it common sense or codified teaching? The answer, like breath in the cold, evaporates quickly. You walk faster now in your imagination, moccasins crunching snow with each step. Your body begins to hum, warmth blooming in your chest. Soon you feel almost too hot, tugging your robe open at the collar, steam rising from your shoulders, sweat beads on your forehead, and you realize the balance is delicate. Move too little and you freeze. Move too much and damp clothes chill you later. Precision mattered, a dance between motion and rest. Curiously, games and dances often served this dual purpose. Entertainment, yes, but also body heat. Winter evenings might bring stickball matches in snow or hours of communal dancing by firelight. Muscles pumping, blood racing. Children ran laughing, not just burning energy but burning cold away. Imagine the ring of dancers you saw earlier, not only celebrating but also secretly stoking their own internal furnaces. The anthropological debate lingers over whether such movement rituals were consciously linked to thermal survival. Some researchers insist they were simply joyful activities with unintended benefits. Others counter that the connection was obvious, that people understood play and ceremony kept bodies warm as effectively as fire. The truth likely straddles both, joy and survival braided together. You picture yourself in a hunting party now, far from camp. The group stops briefly, crouching in snowdrifts, but no one lingers too long. They shift feet, stamp toes, swing arms, laugh quietly to keep blood moving. One man pulls a bowstring, stretches, then jogs in place. They are not only waiting for game, they are fighting cold with every twitch of muscle. As you join them, your body learns the rhythm. Step, breathe, swing arms, keep moving. The snow squeaks, the wind moans, but your heart beats louder than both. Soon you feel warmth coursing from chest to fingers, flushing life into numb skin. It is a reminder that the human body is its own hearth, if only you feed it with effort. When night falls and the group returns to camp, you notice how quickly stillness returns the chill. But for those hours of travel, movement carried you like a cloak of fire. You stretch aching legs by the fire, smiling at the irony. The same walk that tired you out also saved you from freezing. Curiously, some traditions linked specific breathing techniques with warmth. Deep, rhythmic inhalations, timed with steps, were said to stoke the fire in the belly. Whether this was symbolic or physiological, the effect is real. You breathe deeply now, and warmth floods your lungs, chest expanding with energy. You realize survival was never just about tools. It was about listening to your own body's secret mechanics. The debate continues among researchers. Was movement considered a deliberate thermal strategy or simply the inevitable rhythm of hunting life? Regardless of the answer, your body knows the truth. Warmth blooms with every stride, proof written in flushed cheeks and fogging breath. When you finally lie down that night, muscles sore but blood still warm, you understand the lesson. Warmth doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it is hidden within you, waiting to be summoned by the steady drum of your feet against snow. You drift to sleep with that thought, grateful that even without wood or hide, your body itself knows how to fight winter's teeth. Your legs still ache from the imagined march, but as you settle into thought again, you notice the way hunger gnaws at you. Movement creates heat, yes, but it also burns through energy fast. To keep the body's furnace alive, you must feed it hearty, sustaining, and often fatty food that sticks to your bones. Without it, warmth flickers out, no matter how many robes you wrap around yourself. Nutrition, then, was its own form of insulation. Historical sources describe how native peoples across cold regions relied on high-calorie winter diets rich in fat and protein. In the Arctic, seal blubber and whale meat provided dense fuel, while in the plains, bison fat and marrow sustained hunters. Woodland tribes roasted nuts, dried corn, and pounded pemmican, a mix of meat, fat, and berries into long-lasting rations. Imagine sinking your teeth into a lump of pemmican by firelight, its taste heavy, oily, yet sweet with dried fruit. It isn't delicate cuisine, but the instant you swallow, you feel the fire inside stoke higher. A quirky anecdote from explorer journals mentions guides carrying lumps of pure fat to nibble on during long treks. Outsiders recoiled at the idea, but the guides laughed, calling it walking fire. You smile at the thought of someone chewing a fistful of fat as casually as you might munch a granola bar today, the grease glistening on their lips, the heat blooming in their bellies. Scholars debate whether such diets were purely pragmatic or layered with symbolic value. Some argue fat was revered as sacred, the richest gift of the animal, consumed with ceremony. Others insist reverence was merely gratitude born of necessity. Was fat food or sacrament? The evidence flickers between practicality and spirituality, refusing to settle. You sit by the fire now, watching as a pot of stew bubbles gently, filled with corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters of the Iroquois fields. The broth steams against your cheeks, its aroma earthy and sweet. You dip a carved wooden spoon and taste warmth itself. The liquid runs down your throat and spreads through your chest, loosening muscles, easing shivers. You can almost believe the food is fire transformed into flavor. Around you, hunters roast marrow bones, cracking them open with stone tools, scooping out rich, oily centers. Children beg for bites, their faces smeared with grease. The firelight makes everything glisten: hands, lips, pots. You realize grease and fat weren't indulgence. They were currency of warmth. Every smear on a child's cheek is proof of survival tomorrow. Curiously, some communities brewed teas from pine needles or bark, their vitamin-rich infusions staving off scurvy and illness in winter. Imagine the sharp tang on your tongue, the steam warming your nostrils, the faint bitterness followed by a glow in your belly. Warmth here is not only calories but health, a shield against sickness that could weaken your fire from within. The scholarly conversation continues about the role of communal feasts in winter. Some argue they redistributed scarce resources, ensuring no one starved, while others hoarded. Others claim feasts were more spiritual than nutritional, meant to honor the spirits of hunted animals. Perhaps both were true, full bellies and full hearts reinforcing each other around fire. You lean back now, stuffed with stew and marrow, a greasy sheen still on your lips. The cold beyond the lodge seems less threatening. Your blood hums with energy, your core feels steady, and you realize warmth is not only wrapped around you in hides but burning inside you, fueled by food that carries the sun's memory into your cells. Later, as you lie beneath robes, you hear soft snores around you. The air smells of roasted meat and sweet corn, and even your dreams taste heavy with fat and berries. You wake briefly in the night, stomach still full, and smile at the thought. Survival is delicious, even when flavors are simple. Food is heat disguised as flavor, calories transformed into fire within your veins. At dawn, the hunters rise early, nibbling dried pemmican before stepping into snow. You follow them in your imagination, chewing a bite of the dense mixture. It crumbles dry on your tongue, then melts into oily richness, sending warmth coursing through your chest. Each step feels lighter, your furnace stoked anew. You understand now that eating was never just about hunger, it was about feeding the flame that carried you through winter. And as you walk into the frosty morning, you realize the truth is simple. Every roasted bone, every sip of pine tea, every greasy bite of pemmican was not just nourishment. It was insulation in another form, a way of weaving fire into flesh, turning meals into warmth that outlasted the fiercest storm. Your belly is still heavy with imagined pemmican, marrow, and corn stew as you continue forward, the cold settling less sharply now that you know your furnace within is well fed. But soon you notice another truth of winter survival. Warmth is not only about what you eat or wear, but how you live day to day. A body in motion burns fuel, yes, but a body at rest must also know how to rest wisely. Native peoples developed countless small practices of conservation, using clever routines to stretch warmth across hours and days. Historical accounts highlight how daily life in winter shifted into a rhythm of efficiency. Fires were fed at set intervals, not haphazardly. People clustered near the hearth during tasks, whether weaving, carving, or sewing, so that no movement was wasted. Imagine sitting in a circle now, bone needle in your hand, mending a robe as close to the embers as you dare. Sparks jump occasionally, but your knees glow with heat, your breath fogs less, and the hum of conversation fills the air. One quirky detail described by travelers is how some families timed chores with fire cycles. When the flames roared, work requiring light or dexterity was done. When embers glowed low, it was time for stories, songs, or sleep. The fire became the clock, its rhythms dictating human rhythms. You smile at the thought of children arguing about bedtime, only to be told, "The coals are low, it's time." Warmth, here, was both schedule and survival. Researchers still argue about how strictly such routines were codified. Some suggest they were cultural rules passed down carefully, while others believe they were simply instincts refined by experience. Was there a strict philosophy of fire management, or only the collective memory of what worked? The answer is uncertain, but the consistency of practice across regions speaks for itself. You lean back against a post now, feeling the steady heat of the fire nearby. Around you, daily chores proceed with a kind of quiet choreography. A woman stirs a pot while leaning close enough to warm her knees. A man carves a tool with his hands just inside the fire's halo. Children sit in laps, absorbing warmth secondhand. Nobody wastes effort warming an empty corner of the lodge. Everybody is placed with intent, as carefully as logs on the fire. Curiously, even sleep followed this efficiency. Some groups arranged themselves like spokes of a wheel around the fire, feet angled inward to absorb heat. Others slept in shifts, one person always tending embers while others rested. The pattern ensured no one woke to frozen coals. You picture yourself curled at the edge of such a circle, toes pointed toward the glow, ears lulled by the quiet crackle, trusting someone else to keep watch. The scholarly discussion extends into whether these conservation practices were consciously taught to children or absorbed naturally. Some anthropologists insist lessons were explicit, elders instructing youngsters on where to sit, how to breathe into their hands, how to cover coals at night. Others argue it was tacit knowledge, learned by imitation, never formally spoken. Perhaps both are true, you see. A child now watching an elder cover embers with ash, eyes wide, storing the memory for future winters. You notice how even the lodge itself reflects conservation. Smoke holes could be narrowed at night, hides pulled tighter, mats adjusted to cut drafts. Families learned to seal spaces like sailors trimming sails. Every flap mattered, every layer counted, and every mistake cost heat. You feel the hush as someone pulls a flap tighter now. The wind muffled, the fire's glow suddenly more concentrated. Curiously, there are reports of certain groups warming stones in daytime fires, then tucking them into corners of shelters to release warmth overnight. It's a practice halfway between the stone heating pits you saw earlier and the careful fire cycles here. You imagine a child curling against such a stone, clutching it like a doll, waking with cheeks flushed though the fire burned low. The ingenuity seems endless, each trick small but powerful when combined. The anthropological debate also touches on whether this conservation was mostly communal or individual. Some argue families fiercely guarded their own heat, while others emphasize the shared nature of fires, the pooling of labor. Sitting here now, with laughter and chores overlapping, you sense the truth leans toward sharing. Heat is generous, by nature it spills. It radiates, and survival worked best when people did the same. As the evening deepens, the fire is banked with ash, glowing softly. Conversation fades into drowsy murmurs. Hands slow their work, and children slump against parents' sides. The lodge quiets not from command but from rhythm, the unspoken agreement that warmth is preserved in stillness. You pull your robe tight, your body already mimicking the cycle's slower breath, heavier limbs, conserving your own flame. When dawn arrives, the coals are uncovered, sparks coaxed back to flame. You rise with the rest, stretching stiff limbs, cheeks warm from a night of careful conservation. The cold outside still waits, patient and merciless, but you step into it with calm. You know now that survival is not always about grand feats or clever inventions. Sometimes it is about small rituals, practiced daily, turning habit into heat. And as you walk forward once more, you realize that the rhythm of winter was not chaos but choreography, a dance of fire and breath and stillness that turned fragile bodies into something enduring. Warmth lived not only in wood and hide but in the wisdom of how to use them wisely, every hour, every night. The rhythm of careful fire cycles still hums in your ears as you step once more into the cold, but this time your eyes drift upward to the night sky. The stars shine hard and sharp, and you sense that warmth wasn't always about bodies or walls, it was also about belief. When you live in a world where winter can kill, the stories you tell become as vital as fur robes or glowing stones. Warmth, at times, came from faith itself, a shield woven out of meaning. Ethnographers recorded countless tales of spirits associated with fire, the sun, or the hearth. In some traditions, the flame inside a lodge was said to be a living being that must never be insulted or neglected. In others, the sun's return after solstice was celebrated with prayers and offerings, ensuring its light would once again spill across the snow. Imagine kneeling beside a hearth now, whispering thanks not only for heat, but for the very presence of the flame, treating it as guest and guardian alike. One strangely touching detail appears in stories from the far north. Mothers telling children that each spark rising from the fire was a soul-keeping watch, drifting skyward to guard the camp. Picture a child's eyes widening as sparks whirl upward, comforted not only by the glow but by the thought of unseen companions, its warmth reframed as kinship, as connection across worlds. Scholars continue to debate how literally such beliefs were held. Some argue fire worship was metaphorical, more poetic than doctrinal. Others insist rituals around flame reveal deep cosmologies where warmth and life were inseparable. Was the hearth a tool first and a symbol second, or the other way around? The disagreement smoulders, unresolved, like coals banked under ash. You settle in a circle of singers now, voices rising around a central fire. The flames leap and sway as if dancing in response, and you feel how belief itself radiates heat. The chants do not chase away the cold in any measurable way, but your chest swells, your skin tingles, and suddenly the night feels less hostile. Spirit can stoke embers as surely as breath. Curiously, some ceremonies involved carrying coals from one fire to another in solemn procession, ensuring continuity. The act itself had practical value, saving time on ignition, but it was also sacred, a promise that no hearth would be left cold. You imagine walking in such a procession, your hands wrapped around a glowing bundle, feeling not only its heat but its weight as tradition. The anthropological discussion expands further. Were these beliefs merely survival psychology, tricks of comfort in hard winters? Or were they genuine cosmological truths that shaped every action, from when to hunt to how to cook? For modern observers, the temptation is to separate faith from function. But lying here by the fire, you sense that distinction may never have existed. Belief and survival were one. The air smells of cedar smoke, sharp and cleansing. Someone tosses herbs into the flames, and sweet aromas rise, spiraling skyward. People lean into the smoke, brushing it across their faces, gathering its warmth not only for their skin but for their spirits. The fire becomes a temple, its light falling across, eyes closed in reverence. You feel yourself drawn into that hush, body softened by heat, mind soothed by rhythm. You remember too that some stories tied warmth to ancestors directly. The hearth was seen as their presence, their breath in this world. To feed the fire was to honor them, to let their memory glow. You picture a grandmother whispering as she adds a log, thanking those who came before for carrying the flame through winters past. In that gesture, the cold outside loses some of its edge. Curiously, not all traditions celebrated flame alone. Some told of cold spirits that had to be appeased, fed offerings so they would not press too hard on a village. It's a reminder that warmth was not just embraced but negotiated, a balance struck between forces of heat and frost. You shiver at the thought, then lean closer to the fire, grateful for its golden defiance. The scholarly debate about these cosmologies persists, but for you, sitting in the flickering glow, the argument feels unnecessary. The warmth in your chest is real, whether born of calories, coals, or prayer. The crackle of logs, the hush of voices, the scent of cedar, all combine into a cocoon as tangible as fur or stone. When the night deepens, the chants soften, and the fire burns steady. You lie down, eyes on the sparks spinning upward, imagining them as tiny souls watching over you. Your body relaxes, your breath slows, and you realize that warmth is more than temperature. It is meaning, memory, and the comfort of believing you are not alone in the dark. And as you drift towards sleep, you understand why people gave flame a soul. In the heart of winter, when death presses close, believing that your fire is alive means believing that life itself will endure. The night of stories and prayers fades, and dawn creeps in pale and thin. You step once more into snow that crunches like glass under your moccasins. The fires are banked, the robes still wrapped tight, yet you notice something different now. It isn't only tools, shelters, or rituals that kept people warm. It is the closeness itself, the decision never to face the cold alone. Warmth was always multiplied by community, by the trust that someone else would tend the fire when your eyes closed, or share their robe when your own wore thin. Ethnographic notes speak often of this final, simplest truth. Survival was collective. Families huddled together, clans built longhouses, hunters shared food, elders taught the art of tending lamps. The warmth of winter was rarely one person's labor. It was everyone's. You imagine standing at the edge of a camp now, smoke rising from many fires, each one a thread in a greater fabric. Alone, a flame is fragile. Together, 100 flames weave into a quilt of heat against the night. One detail you might find endearing is the way laughter itself seemed to serve as fuel. Travelers wrote of nights when, despite hunger and chill, people told stories until the entire lodge shook with giggles. Picture children wrapped in hides, eyes wide, erupting in laughter at a trickster tale, their cheeks glowing red not only from the fire, but from joy. That glow is real, body heat raised by emotion, shared by all. Survival, it turns out, had its jokes. Scholars still wrestle with the question of balance. How much was survival due to ingenious technologies, lamps, trenches, mats, and how much to human cooperation? Some insist tools mattered most, while others argue that without community, even the best shelter would fail. Was warmth an invention, or was it a relationship? The debate continues, yet as you watch figures pass food and coals from one hearth to another, the answer seems obvious. You sit now at the center of a circle, a fur robe draped across your shoulders. Around you, people lean together, shoulders touching, breaths mingling in the cold air. The fire burns, yes, but the greater warmth comes from the press of bodies, from the knowledge that every person here is part of the same survival. You feel it in your chest, heat braided with trust, insulation woven out of belonging. Curiously, even conflict carried its warmth. Stories tell of quarrels erupting in lodges, voices raised, tempers flaring, but afterward, laughter returned, food was shared, fire tended together. Perhaps even arguments stoked a kind of heat, proof that people cared enough to speak rather than slip into silence. Warmth, in this sense, was not perfection but persistence. The anthropological conversation never fully settles on how to rank the methods you've seen. Stone heating, grease lamps, feather blankets, caves, longhouses, snow trenches. Each strategy shines, but none alone explains endurance. What tied them all together was community, whether two people huddled in a trench or 200 sharing a longhouse. Without that, even the brightest flame could gutter out. You close your eyes, feeling the drum of many hearts around you. Someone hums a tune, low and steady, and the sound wraps the group as surely as any robe. A child nestles against your arm, a dog curls by your feet. For a moment you no longer sense individuals but one breathing, radiant organism, pulsing heat into the night. That, you realize, was the greatest invention of all, the choice to stay close, to endure together. And now, as the story draws to its close, you look back over the journey. You have seen how people coaxed warmth from stones and snow, from dogs and dances, from lamps and legends. You have felt the weight of feather quilts, the sharp scent of pine bedding, the grease on your cheeks, the glow of adobe walls. Each method carried its own genius, its own odd charm, its own debates among scholars. Yet all of them led to this same truth. Warmth was never one thing but many, layered like hides on a bed, bound together by community. The fire at the center of the circle burns low, but your body no longer shivers. You are full of food, full of laughter, full of memory. The storm outside can rage as it pleases. Inside, you hold 1,000 years of ingenuity in your bones. And so, With that thought, you let your eyes close, trusting the warmth to last till dawn. Now, as the long path of winter fades in your imagination, let the images soften like embers beneath ash. See again the glow of fire on stone walls, the shimmer of grease across a child's cheek, the laughter echoing in a longhouse filled with many hearts. Picture dogs curled close, feathers rustling, pine branches releasing their sharp, clean scent. Each moment of warmth was not just survival, it was a whisper of belonging, a reminder that cold could be endured because no one faced it alone. Breathe deeply, slow and easy. Let the chill outside drift farther away with every exhale. Imagine the steady rhythm of a quillic lamp, its small flame humming softly, casting gold across the blue of snow. Feel your body sink into pine boughs, into feather quilts, into the memory of countless generations who discovered, again and again, that warmth can be found in the simplest places. The storm outside no longer matters. In your mind, you're inside the cocoon of a lodge, smoke drifting upward, laughter hushed, breath mingling with breath. The fire glows low but steady. The air smells of earth and fir, of roasted food and pine smoke. Everything is calm. Let that calm sink into you now. Your muscles loosen, your breath evens out. You are warm, safe, part of a circle that stretches across time. Even as the fire dims, the warmth remains inside your body, inside your heart, carried like an ember across the night. So drift now, slowly, gently, like a spark rising toward the stars. The cold is far away, the warmth is all around, and in this quiet, steady glow, you can rest. Sleep well.